This story begins with a brutal betrayal. The protagonist, An Suho, a seasoned prosecutor, was kneeling before those he once called his colleagues. His body was trembling and the marks of poisoning were clearly visible on his arms. He coughed violently, his breathing was weak and ragged, and it did not take long for him to realize that this was no ordinary poison. It was far more dangerous and perhaps even fatal. Two team members stood before him, and far from helping him, they were laughing. In fact, they were enjoying watching him suffer. One of them, a warrior, scoffed and said that Suho should have joined their plan. But Suho chose a different path. Instead of succumbing to corruption, he stubbornly upheld his morals and remained faithful to his duties as a public servant. The team had just conquered one of the 5 notorious restricted gates where terrifying monsters appeared. However, these bastards now wanted to leave the gate open. They did not want to finish it. They wanted to ensure the monsters were not completely wiped out so they could keep returning. This was because as long as danger existed, their profession, influence, and status would be maintained. If the monsters disappeared, the spotlight would vanish and their power would vanish. Suho remembered every moment he had spent fighting alongside them in life-or-death battles and entrusting his life to them. And now, they were watching him die without a shred of guilt. They justified their actions by claiming that Suho was the only one who opposed the plan, implying that everyone else had agreed. Just then, an archer stepped forward, nonchalantly extended a hand, and offered Suho a second chance. He said they would spare his life if Suho agreed to their convenience. However, Suho was not a fool. How could he trust the people who had just poisoned him and watched him suffer? Moreover, he was already feeling it. His body had exceeded its limits. The poison had spread too far. He could not return in this state. His survival was impossible. However, even if he could not live, there was one thing he could do: take at least one of these traitors with him. With that, Suho began to gather all his remaining strength. A sharp, overwhelming, and powerful aura emanated from him. Several members of the group immediately succumbed to a panic of fear and recoiled in terror. However, one woman in the group, though more terrified than anyone, tried to calm everyone down, telling them not to panic. The archer, looking as if he were about to wet his pants, instinctively sensed that the situation was dire, and at that moment, Suho. He moved. With a single swift movement, he charged forward. His blade learned the warrior's arm, and the very next moment, with deadly precision, he learned the black magician woman's neck. The archer dragged the healer back and barely managed to retreat. Their haughty expressions, once filled with arrogance, vanished completely. In an instant, they were replaced by sheer terror. The healer desperately chanted healing spells to save the wounded warrior, but to no avail. Shockingly, she realized that she could not heal him at all. Her eyes turned towards Suho. She saw something strange and powerful. Suho was no longer a dying man. He was overflowing with the power of will itself, and that was not all. His sword, too, had been completely forged by that very indomitable will. It was called the Invisible Sword, a weapon born of pure determination. However, that power came at a price. The energy that had kept him standing finally vanished. Suho's strength ran out and his body collapsed. He staggered backward and fell down the cliff behind him. He plummeted into a deep abyss and vanished from their sight, leaving only Jiang behind. Suho slowly opened his eyes at the chaotic sounds around him. I heard shouting, sirens, and the distinct sound of people running. He was being carried by a firefighter, but he had no idea what was happening. His head was spinning, he had lost his sense of direction, and everything felt foggy. Everything felt unreal, like a dream or a nightmare. The firefighter carrying him was hurrying toward a designated safe zone, speeding through a crowded, airport-like street. At first, Suho could not comprehend the situation. The last thing he remembered was dying. He knew he was dead. But how was he here? Alive, confused, and being rescued? Then something dawned on him. He realized what was happening around him. A gate had opened, presumably a gate. It had triggered a dungeon outbreak. Monsters were swarming the area, specifically goblins. Dozens of them were running through the city, attacking everything in sight. As Suho looked around, he saw a familiar specimen of the Shindalam station lying on the ground nearby. At that moment, everything made sense. His memory was accurate. This was the very station that had been contaminated by the sudden gate outbreak. He had seen something like this happen before. Suddenly, an arrow flew from somewhere and struck the firefighter who was flipping over the writing. The man screamed and collapsed, and both he and Suho fell to the ground. The goblins were drawing closer and closer. Despite the pain, the injured firefighter looked at Suho and told him to run away, but Suho did not move. Instead of running, his eyes were fixed on the axe the firefighter was holding. Without hesitation, Suho grabbed it, aimed, and threw it with all his might at the approaching goblin. The weapon flew through the air, accurately struck the goblin, and knocked it down with a single attack. And right at that critical moment, in front of Suho, like a digital display, Strange floating characters appeared. It was a system window. It celebrated his awakening. For a moment, he just stared at it blankly. It was exactly the same as before, just as he remembered it. The system asked him to select a desired class. Reflexively, his finger almost chose the warrior. It was an instinct, but he stopped. No, this time, he decided to postpone the choice. Suho turned his gaze to the goblins, who were now raging like madmen and whose screams were echoing across the battlefield. They laughed like lunatics, as if victory were already theirs, and seemed completely unconcerned. But Suho found it not amusing. Without wasting a single second, he jumped straight into the crowd. His movements were sharp and effortless, and he fended off incoming attacks like a gentle breeze. A goblin tried to sneak up from the side, hoping to land a successful attack. However, the moment his eyes met Suho's, he froze in terror. It was because Suho had retrieved the axe he had just thrown right before his eyes. The goblin realized it instantly, and his face contorted in pure panic. And honestly, if the goblin had been wearing pants, he probably would have wet his pants right there. But Suho didn't care. He hadn't come to protect. Before the creature could even scream, Suho had learned the move in a single, clean stroke and attacked that spot. He blocked it before it became even more disgusting than it was already dirty. He didn't stop there. Picking up a goblin verification from the ground, he continued to move. He knew exactly what he was dealing with. Goblins were dangerous, of course, but to him, a veteran who had seen things far more horrific than those of a beginner, cutting down a goblin was not difficult at all. It was a damn easy task for Suho. Suho continued to slaughter the goblins, cutting them down with speed and precision far sharper than before. In just a few minutes, the entire goblin swamp was completely wiped out. It ended so quickly that it felt almost unreal and illegal. As the dust settled, Suho looked down at the sword in his hand. He realized how easily he had gotten worked up. In that moment, he was neither calm nor calculating. He had acted purely on instinct and emotion. And while raw power was useful, he knew that in times like this, what was truly needed was a cool head. But upon reconsideration, if he wasn't wrong, he had returned to the past for a reason. This was a second chance, a rare opportunity to start everything over from scratch, and he would not waste it. Suddenly, several system windows appeared before him, congratulating him on mastering various swordsmanship techniques. But just then, something right caught his attention. A nearby firefighter was clearly looking at him with curious eyes. Suho's fighting style was impossible to miss, and the man couldn't help but wonder if this person was a player. Suho simply nodded lightly in response and focused back on the system. He had made up his mind about his career choice. He was going to become a healer. Having made that decision, Suho approached the firefighter and politely asked if he would mind looking at his injuries. The man looked a little confused. Just a few minutes ago, he had saved Suho, yet now Suho was offering to treat him. It didn't quite add up, but Suho didn't hesitate. He activated the magical healing light, and immediately the warm light of the spell began to take effect. His wound was completely healed in an instant. The firefighter could hardly believe what he was seeing. He had watched the goblin water sweep through the entire area like a newly trained swordsman, so how could Suho be a healer? Before the man could ask any more questions, another system window appeared. It was now time for Suho to select a weapon from the armory. He did not hesitate. He knew exactly what he wanted. He picked up the same beginner's sword he had used before and began preparing to challenge the gate ahead. This sudden decision made the firefighter slightly nervous and even sent him into a panic. The gate ahead was not to be taken lightly, but Suho had something important to rely on. He had acquired swordsmanship talent before choosing his profession. This was a crucial detail. Skills acquired based on innate talent could be used regardless of which class the player chose. And as the player leveled up, those skills and class skills would continue to evolve and become stronger. Suho recalled something. Isabella's Holy Spirit was the highest upgrade of the healing light. If he had possessed such power back then, perhaps the situation might have been different. However, this time he was determined to do it right. He had a clear plan. He would bypass both the path of a swordsman and a healer. His resolve grew even stronger as he recalled the faces of those trashy former colleagues who had betrayed and abandoned him. He drew closer to the gate that had nearly killed him in his past life. Back then, he was weak and unprepared. But now, with the fundamentals of swordsmanship ingrained in his very being, he knew he could handle it. Without a trace of hesitation, Suho walked forward and stepped into the gate. As Suho passed through the entrance, he suddenly found himself standing in the middle of a dense, shadowy abacus. Immediately, a system window appeared before him, displaying the name of the area, green-red. It was a strange name, but he didn't have much time to think about it. After walking for a while, Suho stumbled upon a gruesome sight of several goblin corpses scattered across the ground. Judging by their positions and expressions, it seemed they had been fleeing from something or someone far more terrifying than themselves. Their twisted bodies suggested not mere defeat, but terror. Just then, Suho heard a low voice nearby. He turned his head toward the sound and immediately noticed what lay behind it. Two massive hobgoblins were dragging the carcass of a creature they had hunted. These were not the weak, annoying goblins he had seen before. Hobgoblins were entirely different beasts. They were bigger, fiercer, and more dangerous. And when they spotted Suho, their eyes gleamed with excitement. To them, human flesh was a rare delicacy. Without hesitation, they cast their previous prey aside, aimed their sharp weapons at Suho, eager to peck at fresh flesh. However, what they did not know and could not have guessed was that the human they were drooling over was no ordinary prey. They were staring at a predator. The first hobgoblin charged forward, swinging its blade rapidly, but it only sliced through thin air. Suho dodged it cleanly. He already knew he was at a level compared to these enemies. His weapon was not strong enough to easily pierce their thick skin. He didn't need to rely on force. He knew exactly where to attack. With a single swift movement, he lunged straight at the first hobgoblin and aimed directly for its eyes. The attack struck its target. The creature let out a scream sharp enough to shake the trees of the forest. The soft-hearted Suho killed the poor monster to end its suffering, but he had no intention of killing it so quickly. It was a purely habitual mistake, as his attack was so effective. He had hoped to use the creature to gain skill and experience in combat, but he had killed it by mistake too soon. Turning toward the remaining hobgoblin, Suho decided to make the most of this fellow. The second monster, enraged by its fallen comrade, charged forward, wildly swinging its weapon in fury. But Suho remained calm. He focused and dodged each attack with cautious half-rolls. The hobgoblin learned to move left and right like a madwoman, yet not a single one of his attacks hit. In this world, repeating the same action over and over could eventually lead to mastering the related skill. Suho knew this, and sure enough, after parrying a few attacks, a small smile spread across his face. He had acquired the evasion skill, but it wasn't over yet. Now he set his sights on a second technique. Suho began blocking incoming attacks and parried the strikes with precise timing. Parrying was not a simple basic move. It was deeply rooted in weapon-based combat and served as the foundation for many other advanced techniques. It was essential, and Suho wanted it. After successfully parrying a few more times, the system finally notified him that he had acquired the parry skill. Unfortunately, by then, the hobgoblin was already exhausted. He staggered, gasping for breath, and was clearly on the verge of collapse. So, as before, Suho gave him rest, and this time quickly learned the next skill. Not the Book of Cruelty, but just, it was because he needed to. Now that he had acquired 2 new skills, he was ready to fight more. He wanted to face more monsters not for the thrill of combat, but to gain skills and accumulate experience points to become stronger. The atmosphere among the hunters waiting at the gate was tense and irritable. They had just learned that someone had entered the gate assigned to them without permission. The moment the news spread, curses erupted from all directions. Most were angry and felt disregarded, grumbling about who dared to set foot in their territory. Some were already formulating plans to teach this unidentified intruder a lesson if he appeared again. They had no intention of letting it slide so easily. Meanwhile, not far from the gate, a firefighter was engaged in a serious conversation. He was speaking with several men in suits, members of the Hunter Association. They had come for an investigation and were specifically asking about a hunter named Suho. Without hesitation, the firefighter told them everything he knew. From what he saw, Suho was no ordinary hunter. He single-handedly wiped out a horde of zombies and even healed his own wounds amidst the chaos. One of the association staff members listening to the report looked visibly surprised. Although he hadn't arrived late, for some reason the goblins were already completely wiped out by the time he got there. To make matters worse, the person responsible was said to be a healer. At first, he tried to dismiss it as impossible. In their experience, a healer did not possess the combat prowess to accomplish such a feat alone. However, if this fellow had truly cleared a gate, especially one filled with goblins, by himself, he could not be ignored. If he had succeeded, he had to recruit him without fail. Meanwhile, Suho was busy hunting hobgoblins in the field, accumulating experience points one after another. He moved quickly and efficiently, opening gates in a single strike to easily sever the hobgoblins' necks. His attacks were clean and disciplined. He intentionally spared one hobgoblin. At a single glance from Suho, the monster ran away faster than Usain Bolt, but that was exactly what Suho had planned from the beginning. He wanted the creature to escape and bring more of its kind. Taking advantage of a brief lull in the battle, he decided to check his status window. Thanks to the Hokaglin Mull he had just defeated, both his stats and skills had been greatly enhanced. While looking at the piles of goblin corpses around him, another thought crossed his mind. There were still useful things left in those corpses. There were magic stones inside the monsters. The magic stones were D-grade. They were not particularly rare, but they could be sold for about 50,000 each. That alone was reason enough for Suho to take the time to collect them. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't have cared about something like this. He didn't have the luxury of being relaxed. However, his current financial situation was closer to that of a beggar than a hunter, so he could not afford to waste these magic stones. He began carefully extracting them one by one from the fallen monsters and storing them in his inventory. When he finished collecting the loot, he felt a genuine sense of satisfaction. It was quite a good feat. But just as he was about to catch his breath, the silence was shattered. A sudden, pure killing intent enveloped him like a wall. When he turned around, about 30 Hakabis were already approaching. Leading them was the very monster he had previously let go of, the one that had fled in terror, and now that the confirmation was complete. The entire body of water rushed towards Suho in unison. However, Suho did not panic. Instead, he leaped into the air like a ninja and moved as swiftly and precisely as a trained assassin. In an instant, several Hokablins had already fallen, their heads rolling across the ground. His movements were as sharp and uninhibited as cutting butter. As if to reward his efforts, the system notified him that he had leveled up. New stamina points were added to his profile, making him even stronger than before. Having obtained that power-up and gained sufficient experience points, Suho decided there was no need to stall any longer. It was time to finish. He dove straight into the water, slashing in all directions and sweeping through the water with ruthless efficiency. At one point, a Hokablin charged at him head-on and attempted an attack. However, instead of fear, Suho's face glowed with excitement. He was not worried. On the contrary, he seemed even more thrilled than before. The boss monster of this gate was a Hokablin chieftain, a level 20 enemy. True to his role as a boss, he attempted a charge attack first, but it failed miserably. Immediately afterward, a group of small monsters attempted a surprise attack from behind, but Suho reacted instantly without even turning around, cutting them down effortlessly. At that moment, the boss monster switched its weapon and used one of its skills, Fear. The Fear skill was vicious. It paralyzed the target and drove them into a state of pure terror. The higher the skill level, the stronger the effect. And since this was a boss monster, the fact that it could use such a powerful mental skill even within a low-level gate was sufficient explanation in itself. The real problem was that Suho lacked the equipment or skills to protect his mind or resist mental attacks. Currently, there was no way to respond directly. The boss saw this as an opportunity to end the fight and charged forward to seize victory. However, what the boss did not know was that Suho was no novice. He was a veteran hunter who had experienced far more horrific situations. He knew exactly how to handle this. Without hesitation, Suho gripped his sword tightly in his left hand and deliberately learned to fight. A sharp pain snapped him from the paralysis caused by fear. The moment his mind cleared, he parried the boss's attack. Then, instead of focusing immediately on the boss, Suho made a quick decision. He first turned his attention to the small monsters. In a matter of seconds, he traversed the battlefield and mastered every single one of them. With fierce movements in a short time, he swept away all the Hakup Ulrin inside the gate, leaving no enemies behind except for the boss himself. Before facing the Hakup Ulrin chieftain again, he took a moment to treat the wound on his left arm. Now that the obstacles were gone and his body had recovered, it was just him and the boss. One-on-one, there was no longer any interference. And judging by the monster's expression, it no longer seemed very confident. The fight began between the two, and they exchanged attacks in succession. Suho, filled with determination, swung his sword and gave it his all. However, because his level was relatively low, none of his attacks seemed to inflict serious damage on the monster. It was becoming clear that a frontal attack would not work. Realizing this, Suho decided to change his strategy. Instead of aiming his sword at the target, he thrust his sword directly into the monster's thigh, targeting the weak point to slow it down. In response, the monster activated its fear skill once again to paralyze Suho and gain the upper hand. However, it did not work this time. Once fear is overcome, it loses its power, and Suho had already faced and conquered it once. Now unaffected, Suho concentrated all his attacks on that very spot. He mercilessly dug into the weak point while continuously slashing through the injured thigh. After a few more precise and powerful strikes, the boss monster finally collapsed to the ground. Barely alive, it was clearly standing at the threshold of death. But Suho was not finished yet. Instead of delivering the final blow, he suddenly used the health recovery skill, Light of Healing, on the monster. The creature, already confused and half-dead, could no longer fully regain its senses. It could not understand why the human who had nearly killed it was now trying to heal it. On the other hand, Suho was delighted. he had correctly equipped himself with the ability to continue fighting. By repeatedly attacking and healing the monster, he was able to prolong the battle and use it as training. Time passed in a strange cycle of attacking, healing, and repeating. And with every round, Suho grew stronger. His skills steadily improved, and eventually he upgraded several of them to A and B ranks. Meanwhile, the boss monster, once majestic and fearsome, was now engulfed in pure terror. It did not even dare to look at Suho. Now that Suho had learned everything he could learn here, there was nothing left to gain. With this realization, the monster's role ended. It had fulfilled its duty. With a calm expression, Suho beheaded the monster without hesitation, bringing everything to an end. Thus, the gate was conquered. Suho wore the crown of victory. He was selected as the gate's MVP, earning bonus experience points in addition to everything else. His level had now reached 10, a significant milestone for any hunter. Even his healing skill, Healing Rain, was upgraded to a rank. And along with that, he acquired a new skill called Healing. It may not seem like much now, but if his skill continues to develop at a speed of 2, it would not be surprising if someday he could neutralize 10,000 kinds of poison. It was merely the beginning, but the path ahead was clearly promising. Now that everything was concluded, it was time to move on to the next step. Suho turned toward the gate exit. Tension hung in the air outside. As the gate began to shake slightly, people whispered amongst themselves, wondering, has the gate been cleared? But before anyone could speculate further, Suho stepped out. He walked out calmly and confidently, as if the scolding behind him were nothing. There was no sign of fatigue or discomfort on his face, only a quiet composure. The people around him stared at him, unsure of who he truly was or exactly what he had done, but Suho made no need to explain. He simply let their curiosity grow. Soon, several guilds rushed over. They were all seeking the mysterious man who had conquered the gate alone, but Suho ignored all the restrictions, scouting offers, and invitations directed at him. He had no interest. Instead, he walked past them and stood right in front of a man in a suit. Suho greeted him in a calm and confident tone. This man was no ordinary official. He was Yang Chialman, a team leader at the Korea Hunter Association, and judging by his confused expression, he clearly did not expect to be greeted by the very person responsible for the gate raid. The scene shifts to the Korea Hunter Association, and team leader Yang and Suho sat facing each other. On the surface, it looked like a typical registration interview, but the commoners. His mind was elsewhere. His thoughts kept returning to their first meeting. He was like when they first met and exchanged a light handshake. I remembered that Suho had said he was already on his way to the Hunter Association. Anyway, at first, the commoner thought it was merely for license renewal. It was something seasoned hunters always did. However, as the conversation progressed, it became clear that Suho had actually come there for the initial registration. This fact caught Chinmin off guard. He was still struggling to understand how someone like Suho, registered as a healer, had managed to clear the entire gate alone. Furthermore, Suho acted calmly and nonchalantly, eating snacks as if it were just an ordinary Tuesday. Chinmin checked his aptitude test results over and over again. Statistically, Suho seemed closer to a warrior than a healer. The numbers didn't lie. He possessed not only the composure expected of a frontline combatant, but also physical strength and combat instinct. It didn't make sense. While Chinmin was lost in thought, Suho snapped him back to reality by asking if there was a problem. At those words, Chinmin focused again. He began asking Suho a few routine questions, such as his background and education. And from then on, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together one by one. We learned that Suho was a college dropout. Before quitting, he was studying physical education. Most students from that department chose combat professions such as warriors or archers when they entered the hunter field. However, Suho took a different path. He chose the healer class simply because he didn't want to get hurt. Then he began to explain what had happened inside the gate. He described the events of the past year in a frank and almost nonchalant manner. However, he left out one crucial detail, the fact that it had all been so easy for him. He said he had simply fought to survive, and that was all. However, when Suho inadvertently mentioned Chief Hokkabulan, Chinmin froze. There was something unsettling about those words. The gate where Chief Hokkabulan appeared couldn't possibly be easy. Therefore, Suho noticed his discomfort and calmly opened his inventory. The next moment, he dumped all the loot he had collected from the gate directly onto the table. The items fell with a heavy clatter, and Chinmin was completely caught off guard. His eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, he nearly went into a panic. These were magic stones that Suho had collected after hunting Hokkabulans. The smaller ones came from ordinary Hokkabulans, while the larger, refined ones came from the Hokkabulan chieftain. Unaware of their true value, Suho politely asked the team leader if he could help dispose of them. Although he tried to remain calm, Chinmin could not take his eyes off the loot. It was a decent haul. Regaining his composure, he looked at Suho seriously and asked if he really wanted to become a hunter. When Suho nodded, that simple agreement sparked genuine excitement in the team leader's eyes. He tried to steel himself again, and Chinmin believed that this decision was made merely on impulse. He asked if it was, but Suho answered no with a calm smile. He was not impulsive at all. While the commoner was still basking in happiness after hearing Suho's answer, he shifted the atmosphere slightly and began to explain his true reasons. It wasn't about power or money. It was a personal reason. He hated monsters and hated the gates from which they emerged. As a child, he lost his entire family to gate shock. After that, he grew up completely alone in an orphanage. At first, he thought that killing monsters would relieve the deep frustration and pain within him. However, even after defeating many monsters, the knot in his heart never loosened. No matter how many he killed, the pain never disappeared. At that moment, he made a decision. He could not turn back the past, but he could choose the kind of future he wanted to protect. He did not want anyone else to suffer as he had. He wanted to fight for people and for safety, not for revenge. He wanted to do real work in the field, so he decided to become a hunter for the Korean Hunter Association, not for any specific path. Chialmai was genuinely impressed by this answer. However, as someone with experience, he also felt the need to explain the situation. He honestly told Suho that the Hunter Association's salary level was much better than what private guilds usually offered. But Suho seemed completely unconcerned. As long as he had free access to various gates, priority entry, and the authority to punish hunters who committed crimes, that was enough for him. Chialmai was almost starting to doubt his own path. In fact, while the Hunter Association technically held priority in gate entry, they often sold that right to private guilds through auctions. And the reason is simple. No civil servant wants to risk their life for a meager salary. Most people say they join to help others. However, the reality is that people are aiming for stable and safe positions where they can earn money quietly without having to get involved in corruption. That is why many people target administrative positions instead of field jobs. However, in Chialmin's eyes, Suho looked different. He did not pursue safety or comfort on the front lines. True patriots who wanted to protect people and those who sincerely trusted in public service were the types. Chialmin felt dizzy for a moment from the overwhelming sense of happiness, but he quickly regained his composure and returned to the task of dealing with the magic stones. Now, to take the official hunter exam, one had to first pass an aptitude test consisting of a written exam and a practical exam. Unfortunately for Suho, the registration period for this year had already ended, and the exam was scheduled for tomorrow. However, fortunately, Chialmin was by his side. Since Suho had tackled the entire gate alone, there was a good chance he could secure special approval by using Li Xian's influence. That part was not the problem, however. What Chialmin was worried about was the written exam, and it was almost impossible for an ordinary person to pass it after preparing for half a day. However, true to his nature, Suho was confident. For him, whenever an opportunity arose, he had to seize it no matter the circumstances. The only problem was that at this point, our protagonist was practically a beggar. He didn't even have the money to pay the exam registration fee. So, swallowing his pride, he asked team leader Chialmin if he could handle the magic stone. And the reliable Chialmin took on the job without a second thought. At that moment, the only person Suho could fully rely on was his older brother Chialmin, and he was sincerely grateful for that fact. Shortly after, they completed all their aptitude tests. Afterward, team leader Chialmin sent Suho the proceeds from the stakes in Mejongseok. In the next scene, Suho was emptying Yang Chialmin's food warehouse, which was essentially his own. Thanks to Mejongseok, he received 3 million won. Furthermore, because he had registered as a civil servant hunter, he also received partial tax exemption benefits. However, that alone was not enough for him. He had one more request. He had heard that the association had a library, and tomorrow, I wanted to cram for the written exam. He politely asked the team leader if he could be allowed entry. Of course, Chialmin smiled and agreed. He even personally guided Suho to the library, telling him he could enter without an access card. Before parting ways, Chialmin wished him good luck on his exams. Suho quietly watched him leave, reflecting on how kind and trustworthy his brother still was. Deep down, he knew that Chialmin would undoubtedly become the association president someday. And as soon as Chialmin disappeared, Suho turned his attention back to the library. His goal was clear: to find something related to his past life. He remembered the major events that had shaken the entire region, but the details were always difficult to grasp. The human mind is not designed to retain memories across multiple lifetimes, and it was not polite of him to do so. Still, there was a key somewhere. After looking around a bit more for the fragments of knowledge or technology he so desperately desired, Suho finally discovered something strange. It was a book that looked huge and antique and was so thick that it would not fit on any bookshelf. Out of curiosity, he picked it up. The moment he opened the book, a strange message popped up from the system. That book was not of this world. It was also mentioned that there was a special way to use it beyond just reading it, and Suho already knew what that meant. Without hesitation, he lifted the book above his head like an RPG character and activated a hidden quest. For a fleeting moment, he felt as though he had become a complete clown. Nothing happened. His arm began to ache. A sense of self-doubt quickly welled up because I was convinced that this was the only way to activate it. Then, just as he was about to curse at the book, the system spoke again. A book called The Library of Memories took an interest in his story. Just then, the magic was activated. The book sparkled. Reality changed. And in the blink of an eye, Suho was no longer standing in that dusty room. He now stood before the massive tree of this world. Its roots were deeply embedded in shining stones, and its branches stretched toward the sky rather than swinging like a pendulum. A staircase wrapped around it and led to an unknown realm. This was the Library of Memory. It was revealed that the Library of Memory grants the user the ability to recall everything they have seen and heard, including painful or traumatic experiences. An ordinary human would handle it to this extent. However, upon acquiring this ability, the user bears the burden of perfect memory. The original owner of this skill was a manager of the Hexagon Guild, a former employee of the Korean Hunter Association. While studying at the library to change jobs, she unintentionally acquired this ability after using a book as a pillow simply because sleeping face down was uncomfortable. Suho reflects on how fortunate she is to have acquired such a skill by chance and feels grateful for her introducing it to him. He even makes plans to treat her to a meal someday. Then, the system window informs Suho to donate his story to the Library of Memories. He ponders just how powerful that ability truly is. Since human memory tends to weaken and distort over time, this ability could help preserve every memory he has ever held. Realizing its value, he decides that acquiring this skill is essential to remember every detail accurately. A confirmation message appears stating that his story has been accepted. Suddenly, a strong wind swirls around him, and the system announces that the Library of Memories is now accessing his experiences to record them. Suho begins to float in the air, surrounded by glowing text. As a diagram appears on the book, another message follows, announcing that the Library of Memories has officially opened. It will store everything he has seen and heard, allow him to access it whenever necessary, and restrict important information. Suho stares at his hands, thinking that the recording process feels a bit strange. Perhaps it is because this entire space is a kind of illusion. Now, having obtained skis, he decides to put them to the test. He closes his eyes and recalls the previous battle. There, he sees himself severely injured. That moment resurfaces with vivid emotions, and as he feels rage surge once again, he confirms the intense clarity of the memory. He sees those who betrayed him. Now he realizes that they were merely selfish cowards who delayed the gate ceiling to save themselves. He swears that he will never forgive or forget them. His consciousness drifts between countless system windows. The memory made him anxious, and he wished he had recalled something less painful. Then, suddenly, a shocking notification pops up in a system window. He was being given an opportunity to become stronger. As the first individual to reach the state of transcendence, the system announces that it is rebooting to protect the player. As the surrounding world returns to normal, he is left speechless. A thought crosses his mind. Could it be that the system really sent him to the past? He remembers once reaching the state of divine sword absorption and obtaining the first SS rank item. But now, as the first person to achieve transcendence, he was being granted a new opportunity that no one had ever experienced. Suho begins to realize that his past experience with Higi might not have been a mere coincidence. The next moment, he takes a taxi and arrives at a certain location. As he gets out of the car, he reflects on just how meaningful this second chance truly is. Now he has the opportunity to stop the disaster that once struck him and deal with the unpredictable gates that caused numerous casualties. Determined to conquer these gates faster than before, he vows to himself that every moment is important. He soon arrives at the massive building known as the Nexus. Standing before it, he marvels at its immense size and acknowledges that this is the nation's largest private hunter academy. He also regards this place as a potential destination where he can earn a substantial sum of money to secure his future. With firm resolve, he enters. An energetic receptionist greets him and asks the purpose of his visit. Suho replies that he wishes to meet Chairman Kim Soo. Surprised, the receptionist asks if he has an appointment. Suho says he does not, but insists that it is an important matter. He asks her to simply deliver a message that a solo attacker has arrived at the gate prior to the great cataclysm at Sindalam Station. The scene shifts to the chairman's office, where a calm woman introduces herself as Kim Soo, the chairman of Nexus Academy. Suho introduces himself as An Suho. Chairman Kim invites him to sit down and acknowledges his achievements at the Sindalam gate. Then she asks if he has come to Nexus. Suho explains that he has come to apply for a scholarship. The chairman is clearly surprised by the request. Suho confirms this and mentions that he also plans to take the hunter certification exam scheduled for the next day. He still tried to understand the situation, and Chairman Kim asks how long it has been since he woke up. Suho answers calmly. Even more shocked than she was today, she checks the documents and asks in disbelief. The Faith Green Hunter, who just awakened today, wants to take the exam tomorrow and has already cleared a Yihan class gate solo. Suho confirms everything. He adds that his connections within the Hunter Association helped him secure a spot on the exam. His goal is simple: to take first place. The chairman is even more surprised by his confident declaration. Then, Suho presents his conditions. He says that if he takes first place, he wants to be officially granted Nexus scholarship status along with full financial support. Suho knew well that it would not be easy for an unknown newcomer to take first place, but he was not a novice. He was a seasoned veteran who had cleared countless gates. It did not matter whether others believed him or not. Their choice was moxie. Chairman Kim recognized that clearing such a dangerous gate alone was by no means a small feat. However, she reminded him that the hunter exam was a completely different matter, with an average pass rate of less than 20%. Suho made it clear that if he did not take first place, they could ignore him and completely cancel the scholarship deal. Intrigued, Chairman Kim asked why he chose Nexus instead of more prestigious academies like Hexagony or Prime. Suho answered directly. Despite being the largest academy, Nexus had been struggling in recent years. It failed to produce a single top student, and this dealt a blow to its reputation and admission rates. Quietly, Chairman Kim acknowledged the fact. Nexus desperately needed success, and currently no student showed any signs of standing out. If Suho really took first place, Nexus would reap the greatest benefits from the spotlight. In that sense, his proposal was perfectly timed. However, the chairman couldn't help but wonder what kind of person was making such a bold offer with such confidence. Out of curiosity, she asked how much he expected in scholarship money. Suho replied by asking about the rewards for becoming the top student. She explained that the prize money included an additional bonus of 30 million won in advance of tuition, as well as the opportunity to join the Nexus Guild immediately. Suho nodded. It seemed like a reward befitting the nation's largest academy. But then he added it would be better if it were 300 million won. Chairman Kim was shocked by that amount, but Suho continued to argue that the sum was fair considering the advantages of becoming the top student and the scale of the academy. To Nexus, 300 million won wasn't a huge sum anyway. Deep down, Chairman Kim knew he wasn't wrong. Unable to meet her, she agreed and said she would pay 300 million won if he came in first place. Afterwards, Suho walked around the campus. The more he looked around, the more he realized how massive the campus was. It was bigger than most amusement parks. Once admitted, he would lack nothing. The staff member guiding him smiled proudly, explaining that Nexus was the largest academy in South Korea. Seeing that the guide looked tired, Suho assumed he had woken up just to show him around. Feeling a little apologetic, Suho thanked him for guiding him at such a late hour. The guide smiled and said it was the least he could do for someone so important. Just then, Suho spotted someone training alone on the sports field. Curious, he asked if the person was a student. The guide nodded and said that the student trained every night at this time and was the most diligent student at the academy. Suho became interested. The student's name was Dian, when the guide called out to him and told him to take care of his health. Dian said with a smile that he had to work harder since he was already in his third year. Suho recognized him immediately. In his previous life, he had lost Dian and his team and served as a raid character. At that time, Dian was the nation's top tank, famous for his unrivaled endurance and defensive abilities. It was unfortunate when pure tanks lost their place in the meta as time passed. However, watching Dian wield an axe instead of a shield, Suho realized that Dian had not yet awakened his true potential. This was a perfect opportunity. He could now lead the alternative and eventually recruit him into the Great Hunter Association. the guide introduced the two people. After exchanging brief greetings, Suho asked Dian if he intended to use a battle axe as his primary weapon. Dian confirmed that he did. Suho then asked if he had chosen that specific weapon. Dian explained that since he was aiming to become a frontline combatant, his instructors had recommended the axe, saying it suited his physique well. The guide added that there were few weapons that could rival a battle axe in terms of pure destructive power. Suho asked Dian if he had trained exclusively with the axe. Dian admitted that he had. Describing himself as a slow learner, he said that trying out various weapons felt like a waste of time. It only took him a while to get to handle the axe to some extent, and even now he did not feel particularly proficient with it. Suho quietly analyzed the situation and identified the real problem. It was not that Dian lacked effort, the axe simply did not fit him. It was not a matter of commitment, it was a matter of the wrong direction. If he had not made progress early on, he should have changed weapons. Suho was surprised that even the nation's top academy had missed something so obvious. He suggested a different way of thinking. Since players would receive staff adjustments later anyway, it was more reasonable to choose a weapon that felt natural to them. While proficiency could rise rapidly due to skill scaling effects, true combat skill depended on knowledge and experience. In Dian's case, the battle axe was clearly not suitable. Although it delivered powerful blows, its long cooldown made the user vulnerable. Furthermore, considering Dian's large size, protecting him effectively became even more difficult. Upon hearing this, Dian was flustered. This was because he had been training to be a helper for the past 3 years. Suho acknowledged his efforts but pointed out that Dian's true strength might lie in tanking. He advised Dian to try using kite shillings on his left arm and a one-handed shilling on his right. According to Suho, this combination would significantly improve Dian's overall combat efficiency. Dian hesitated. Switching roles with the exam right around the corner felt risky, especially since the exam was the very next day. Then Suho asked him to consider what the true core of a raid party was. Many believed it was the mage, but in reality it was always the tank. A tank's duty was to draw the enemy's attention and protect the team. To pull that off properly, the tank needed both a shield and a secondary weapon for crowd control. Dian finally realized this from Suho's explanation. Spurred on by that insight, he decided to give it a try. Suho was pleased that Dian was not held back by doubt and highly valued his quick thinking and adaptability. Suho wished him good luck, and Dian thanked him and left. Immediately after that, the guide explained that Chairman Kim had asked him to give Suho a tour, so he introduced him as a guest. However, the guide now became curious. Was Suho really an instructor? He seemed to know a great deal about combat and contracts. Although Suho had identified himself as an instructor, he thought inwardly that it must appear suspicious for someone without a license to know so much. He explained that he was closer to being an interested party. The man nodded and said he had just received a phone call. Since the contract was ready, it was time to return to the chairman's office. And then, the day of the hunter exam dawned. The association building was bustling with examinees, each armed with a weapon, striving to obtain their hunter license. Everyone had ceaselessly prepared for this moment, honing their skills to be in peak condition. Ironically, Suho, the very man who had cleared the gate alone, was in the worst condition. As he left after finishing the exam, Suho pondered the purpose behind it. It had been implemented due to concerns about potential doping. However, in his opinion, such measures were meaningless. Most cheaters did not use drugs, they used skill buffs. During the exam, several individuals, including one particular woman, displayed magical power levels unbelievable for O levels. That was when the system informed him that Suho's magical power detection ability was far superior to that of the majority. He had completely mastered the magical power detection skill. Thanks to this, Suho could notice anomalies more easily. Although there had been no official reports, he knew that many were already cheating using buffs. He thought it was time to put an end to this. Looking at Chialman, Suho felt grateful that there was at least one honest person around him. Walking down the hallway where other candidates were discussing the exam, he could not shake the feeling that he had unwittingly become a cheater himself. Chialman approached and asked how the exam went. Suho replied that he was confident he would pass and then asked if Chialman was there. Chialman explained that he was helping out because the association was always short of manpower. He also mentioned that he had heard this written exam was the most difficult ever and was impressed by Suho's confidence. Suho replied that he felt like he could handle everything and asked if he could make a suggestion. Chialman said it was fine as long as it wasn't about the exam itself. Suho said that it was somewhat related. He pointed out that there was no check for buffs at all during the test and asked for the reason. Chialman asked what he meant by buff inspection. Suho explained that while the association conducts urine and blood tests to prevent drug use and confiscates personal items to prevent cheating through equipment, It appears there are no inspections for skill-based cheating. He suggested that using magic detection would allow them to identify those who have received buffs more effectively. Xiaomin thanked him for the suggestion and promised to review it before the practical exam. Suho said he would prepare for the next exam. Before leaving, Xiaomin stopped him and told him that he personally hoped Suho would do well so that they could work together. He wished him good luck on the practical exam, and Suho expressed his gratitude. 30 minutes later, at the exam site, an announcer informed everyone that the test had been delayed by 2 hours due to a problem with the dive capsule. All candidates were instructed to eat lunch at the military mess hall and wait in the lounge or training grounds, but Suho could not accept this. It felt like an excuse. He suspected that Brother Xiaomin had already started cracking down on those attempting to cheat using buffs. As expected, Brother Xiaomin was quick to act. It was just as he had anticipated. With a pass rate of less than 10% among 200 applicants, catching the cheaters would likely lower that rate to as low as 7%. Under those conditions, anyone who passed would undoubtedly be a top-tier talent. Suho decided to observe the other candidates to see if there was anyone worth noting. Just then, voices caught his attention. One man was challenging another to a duel. The second man stepped back and snapped at him not to buy the match. However, the first man jokingly replied that he merely wanted to spar and asked if the first man was afraid his lack of skill would be exposed. Annoyed, the second man pushed the text aside and told him to get out of his sight. At that, the first man raised his wooden sword and asked what he thought would happen if he struck first. Before the situation escalated, Suho intervened and blocked the attacker's wooden sword with his own, causing the attacker to back away. The second man was startled and asked Suho if he was crazy, but Suho calmly told him to stay out of it, saying he would handle it. The man asked who Suho was. Suho replied that he was just a student preparing for exams, asking if he was some kind of official, but warned that dealing with such an attacker would only cause unnecessary trouble, so it was best to leave it to him. The attacker then argued with Suho, asking why he was interfering. Suho smiled, introduced himself, and offered to be the sparring partner since the attacker wanted one so desperately. However, the attacker scoffed. He sneered and said he wouldn't waste time sparring with a weakling like Suho. Suho was momentarily flustered by the remark that he was weak. The attacker warned him not to act arrogantly, claiming that Suho had only been lucky earlier and ordered him to leave. However, Suho turned the tables by asking if he was scared. The attacker, annoyed, asked what that meant. Suho suggested they find out if it was really just luck, implying that the attacker lacked the courage to test it out. Falling for the provocation, the man accepted the challenge, hurling insults at Suho and calling him another coward in the crowd. Suho agreed to the sparring match, but stated that they must obtain permission from the supervisor and use the designated sparring area. As soon as permission was granted, the two entered the training ground and attracted the attention of nearby students. The referee reminded them that only training weapons provided by the association could be used and warned that the match would be stopped if the situation became uncontrollable. As the match began, the attacker charged forward first, swinging his wooden sword. Suho lightly blocked it. The attacker leaped into the air and swung downwards, but Suho dodged it effortlessly. The enraged and heated attacker threatened to tear Suho to shreds, but Suho mocked him, calling him pathetically weak for turning a man's wooden sword into a foot. That insult drove the attacker to lose his reason. This man, Park Yong, was known as a mad swordsman. Obsessed with power, he always sought out skilled opponents to fight. His thirst for power had turned him into a ruthless battle maniac. Suho remembered how skilled Yong had been the last time they met and was surprised to see him again as a fellow exam candidate. He immediately realized he had to stop Yong before he repeated his past mistakes. Without warning, Suho delivered a powerful kick, sending Yong flying. As he fell to the ground, Suho scoffed at his former arrogance. Shocked, the dragon asked how Suho was so strong. Suho calmly warned that blindly charging wouldn't work, implying that the dragon had likely never encountered an opponent as powerful as level 10 before. Most of his previous opponents probably hadn't even surpassed level 5. Standing up with a grin, the dragon admitted that Suho looked too composed and declared he would fight with all his might. Suho welcomed this. The dragon unleashed a barrage of consecutive attacks, but Suho dodged them effortlessly, holding his sword in one hand. The intensity of the dragon's attacks had clearly increased, and Suho acknowledged the weight of those blows. Then, the dragon unleashed his ultimate technique, Dragon Sword Hand, giving it his all. As the swords clashed, a dazzling light burst forth. Thinking he had finally landed a crystal slash, the dragon began to celebrate. However, when the light vanished, Suho stood completely unharmed. He had blocked the attack. Shocked and trembling, the dragon demanded an explanation. Suho grinned and said the attack had been too slow. In fact, the dragon only used a basic version of dragon swordsmanship. It was impossible to master the true techniques without a hunter license. Enraged by Gam, the dragon charged again, but Suho effortlessly dodged every attack. For a moment, Suho crouched low, luring the dragon into making one last reckless charge. The moment the dragon shouted that the match was over, Suho delivered a powerful uppercut to his jaw, knocking him completely unconscious. Defeated, the dragon collapsed to the floor in a daze. To the dragon, who tried to understand what had happened, Suho calmly told him that his attacks were simply too slow. The dragon was furious, but all he could do was lie there, hushed tones, and mutter Suho's name. Watching this, Suho realized that the dragon's obsession would now be focused solely on defeating him, ignoring everyone else. Now that the troublemaker was dealt with, Suho thought the testing grounds would finally fall silent. Meanwhile, the supervisors who had been watching everything were stunned but came to their senses. Suho spoke calmly and reported that he had accidentally knocked Park Yang unconscious and asked them to take care of him. In the next scene, Suho was sitting in a room filled with various machines. Attention. Looking around, he noticed people who appeared more seasoned than before, presumably anti-doping inspectors who had been transferred to the rank of technician. As the room grew noisy, Suho became visibly annoyed, his expression clearly showing that he wished they would all just leave. A technician approached him and instructed him to lie down. He then explained how the emergency button worked in case something fell during the dive. Suho confirmed that he understood. As the system power turned on, Suho lay down and cables were connected to both sides of his head. A system window appeared indicating that the Hunter Practical Exam program had been activated. As Suho's consciousness connected to the simulation, the dive progress steadily progressed through 5%, 40%, and 77% before reaching 100%. The connection was successful, and the healer class exam scenario began. When Suho opened his eyes, he found himself in another world. He immediately realized that this exam would not be easy, especially considering how few people passed the healer exam. Before him stood the injured pleading for help and those trapped inside. In particular, one girl was desperately struggling to lift a massive stone. Watching the chaotic scene, Suho inwardly criticized the Hunter Association for making the scenario so ruthless. The entire situation already felt like a trauma. Before proceeding, let's understand the background of the practical exam. This is considered the core of the Hunter exam. The primary goal is to evaluate how well the participant fits into the class they have chosen. The simulation scenarios change every year, and the passing criteria also vary. Generally, these trials involve surviving one-on-one combat or waves of enemies. A participant's score is determined by how long they last and how many enemies they defeat. However, the case is different for healers. The key is not merely how strong their healing abilities are. While healing ability is important, the most highly valued quality is sacrifice. Healers who lay down their own lives to save others earn higher scores. As the monsters began to approach, Suho pondered the nature of the trial. In this scenario, a healer is expected to die protecting a patient. The problem was that his stats were still active. Walking toward the monsters, he discovered a sword on the ground. Seeing that, it seemed like I would have to go through quite a bit of trouble to die. Unlike others, he questioned the logic of letting someone be beaten to death. Dying once was already enough for him. Nearby, others screamed for help upon seeing the monster, but Suho knew those screams were an illusion. In reality, he was surrounded only by corpses. He approached a terrified girl and asked if she was all right. Trembling, she warned him that the monsters would return and that he had to run away, but Suho knew the real person. He had to protect her to the very end. Reassuring her, he promised that a rescue team would arrive and that he would keep her safe until then. Filled with determination, he held his ground, preparing to fight the approaching monsters. Upon reobservation, players began emerging from the simulation pods one by one. Thinking that one of them could have done better, he stepped out. A woman thanked him for his efforts and instructed him to gather his belongings and leave. She moved to another pod and checked the screen. On the screen was participant Kang Jinyoung. Detailed information was displayed at the Archer class record time of 9 minutes and 4 seconds. She said that her score was particularly good this season due to the difficulty of the exams. Curious, she asked Director Shin how long Suho had been inside. Director Shin replied, 30 minutes. Shocked, she uttered the number as if she couldn't believe it had been that long. She rushed to Suho's machine and checked the display herself. 30 minutes, still disbelieving, she asked if Suho was a warrior. Director Shin corrected her, saying Suho was a healer. Refusing to believe it, she accused him of lying. Despite the criticism, director Shin pointed to the sword Suho was holding and urged them to look closely. They reviewed the simulation video together. Watching Suho's performance, the woman asked again if he was truly a healer. Impressed by his combat abilities, she muttered to herself that he might be disqualified for not dying. However, director Shin made it clear that there was no rule requiring death. The true purpose of the test was to protect the patient to the very end. She nodded in agreement. Director Shin explained further. Suho was meeting all the conditions. He did not abandon the patient, fought near her, and continued to treat her throughout. He was risking his life to protect her. As long as all conditions were met, disqualification was not an option. Hearing this, the woman concluded that the highest score for this test was already determined. Meanwhile, Suho was still fighting inside the simulation. With amazing skill, I learned how to defeat monsters with a single blow. However, even after the victory, Suho felt it wasn't enough. He had to be faster. As more monsters appeared, he displayed unwavering concentration and eliminated them one by one. Finally, he brought them all down. A system message appeared. Your understanding of the skill reinforcement is very high. Congratulations. You have mastered reinforcement. Reading the message, Suho realized that although this was a simulation based on real-world mechanics, the system could still recognize his physical control. The system recognized that he was directly controlling his own body, which made it possible to master physical skills. So that's it here. Although the experience points were lower than in actual combat, it was an excellent method for training. He learned various techniques in addition to swordsmanship and raised all basic swordsmanship to a rank. There were no experience point or item rewards, but the result was still satisfying. If he raised all swordsmanship to a rank or higher, he might even be able to develop techniques like Park Yong's dragon swordsmanship. Another message appeared. There is no great one. Your understanding of swordsmanship surpasses everything else. The system is impressed by your unique style and wishes to register you for work. Would you like to create a new swordsmanship skill by combining basic swordsmanship and reinforcement? Suho smiled as he was finally ready to create his own unique style guardian sword. A confirmation window appeared asking if that would be the official name. Suho confirmed. Another message congratulated his long years of mastery and announced the birth of a new unique swordsmanship skill, Guardian Sword S. This new ability enhanced the effectiveness of all his swordsmanship and divination skills by 50%. As a reward for his significant achievement, the system granted him 10 bonus stamina points and conveyed its hope that Suho would continue to walk the path of the sword. The final message confirmed that he had unlocked Sword Realm S, a privilege granted only to those with a deep understanding of swordsmanship. This removed all restrictions on learning and using swordsmanship, further enhanced all sword-related abilities by 50%, and eliminated any restrictions associated with sword usage. Suho. He quietly reminisced about his past life. Back then, it took more than 10 years to reach this level of skill. However, thanks to the knowledge he gained from that life, he had now progressed much faster. He realized just how much his value had grown. Turning his attention to the exam, he recalled that the number of monsters was predetermined and couldn't help but wonder how much effort had gone into preparing all of this. Now that all objectives were accomplished, there were only two paths left: either surrender to the monsters or wipe them all out. Meanwhile, the supervisors watching the live video were speechless. They could not believe what they had just witnessed. For the first time in the history of the practical exam, someone had defeated all the monsters. They recognized not only his combat prowess, but also his successful treatment of the patient. I felt a sense of awe at the mere fact that I had treated it. I even joked that there was no need to check the rankings compared to a single exam. The winner was clear. A few days. The scene then shifted to the Hexagon Guild headquarters. A confident guild member asserted that their student, Kyan, would be the top student this year. Another member agreed, saying he was proud of the effort he had put into his training. But then someone discovered a congratulatory letter. As it was read aloud, confusion spread. In the end, Kyan was not the top student. The name written on the letter was on Suho. Everyone was shocked. As soon as someone asked where Kyan was, the atmosphere immediately became tense and chaotic. At that moment, the guild master answered the phone and the scene shifted again. Suho was now on the phone with the team leader. The team leader apologized for the late congratulations due to a heavy workload, but he did not forget to praise Suho for achieving the highest score. He admitted that he had not expected Suho to go that far. Suho humbly replied that it was all thanks to the team leader. However, the team leader gave Suho the credit, stating that his achievement was entirely due to his own efforts. He also pointed out that Suho's outstanding performance helped to catch numerous cheaters who were illegally enhancing their skills. He noted that this would lead to stricter rules in future exams and viewed this as a positive outcome. Then, the team leader cautiously brought up the question, is Suho still interested in joining the Alternative Winter Association? Suho replied that he could stay in the guild a little longer, but his ultimate goal had not changed. He still intended to join the association. The team leader thanked him for his clear answer and said he would contact him once his physique or exam schedule was ready. Suho smiled and agreed. Before hanging up, the team leader urged Suho to eat well and take care of his health, and Suho responded with equally warm words. The call. After finishing, the team leader looked intently at something in his hand and quietly said that he needed to eat as well. Meanwhile, Suho paused for a moment. The tone of the team leader's voice bothered him. Something felt off. He wondered if something was wrong. Just then, his phone rang again. Suho checked the caller ID and seemed to know who it was. He answered the phone and introduced himself. The caller was Kim Soo, and she congratulated him on his success while confirming that the payment had already been transferred in accordance with the contract. Suho acknowledged her efficiency and praised the professionalism of the large guild. Then, her demands followed. She invited Suho to join the Nexus Guild, promising benefits better than anything other guilds could offer. Curious, Suho asked how far she could accommodate him. Kim Soo assured him that she would do everything possible to meet his expectations. She stated that adjusting the contract terms would not be an issue for him as a top student and scholarship recipient. She even suggested meeting in person to finalize the contract. However, Suho politely declined for the time being, stating that he had personal plans for that day. He promised to review his schedule and contact him soon. Yet he hinted that, considering he was a Nexus scholarship recipient, joining Nexus would be the logical choice over joining any other guild. Kim Soo was overjoyed by his reaction. Her excitement was so intense that even her nearby colleagues noticed it. She begged them not to make any contracts with other guilds during that time. Amused by her enthusiasm, Suho smiled and agreed to meet soon. When the call ended, Suho smiled, the lingering echo of her excited voice. At that moment, the taxi driver informed me that he had arrived. Suho thanked him and got off. Standing outside, Suho looked back on everything that had happened. He had passed the exam, secured the certification, and received the payment. The next chapter of his passion was right before his eyes. With a quiet determination, he moved forward, preparing to start farming. At the Lighthouse General Market, Suho checked his phone and thought about how quickly he had gathered everything he needed. All that remained now was to buy weapons. With that goal in mind, he arrived at a small, secluded shop. He deliberately avoided crowded places, unsure if he would find what he wanted. Standing outside, he wondered if there might be a suitable weapon in this quiet spot. Upon entering, Suho greeted the shop owner, who asked what he needed. Suho explained that he had become a Mac hunter and was looking for light weapons. The shopkeeper led him to an area with cheaper items. When Suho looked at them, he discovered a thick layer of dust and realized that most of the weapons were produced without verified data. However, this did not mean that all unverified weapons were useless. Some weapons had to undergo a process called liberation before revealing their true potential. These special weapons usually emitted a subtle energy, a kind of signal, but most players in a place like this would not be able to recognize it. Suho picked up one of the weapons and activated his magic detect skill. A faint smile appeared on his face. Found it. After taking the weapon out, Suho thought to himself that if the owner were to realize the true value of this spear, he would regret selling it for so cheap. But now was the time to begin. Suho closed his eyes, concentrated, and began pouring his magical power into the weapon. The spear rapidly absorbed his strength and quickly depleted his energy. Realizing just how much power it required to drain to buy it, Suho stopped and collapsed to the ground, completely exhausted. He understood that if he had pushed just a little further, he might have fainted from mana depletion. Awakening the weapon required at least 100 mana stamina. Although he could not use it yet, he knew it would become a powerful asset in the future. He vowed to himself that he would level up quickly and soon unleash its full potential. Meanwhile, inside the PBS building, the host received a call from Suho. Suho introduced himself and confirmed that he had recently taken the top spot in the Hunter exam. He also revealed that he had single-handedly handled an unprecedented gate incident that occurred in Sindalam Station. Jinhai was shocked by the revelation and needed time to quietly process the fact that Suho had cleared such a dangerous gate before even becoming a formally licensed hunter. In Jinhai's eyes, Suho was already a monster. When Jinhai asked why he had contacted her directly, Suho He explained that he found Jinhai's blog while searching. He mentioned that although he knows Jinhai grew up in an affluent environment, he respects her decision to pursue pastoralism out of pure interest. Suho said that he has big plans and will soon become a source of major headlines. Then, he offered Jinhai a job as his exclusive reporter. Jinhai was skeptical, suspecting that Suho was trying to keep a wealthy reporter tied down as his subordinate. Inwardly, she dismissed Suho as just another ambitious, eccentric suffering from delusions of grandeur. Jinhai understood the foot Suho was proposing, but the idea made her uncomfortable. He admitted that he craved a scoop, but he had no desire to work under anyone. Suho made it clear that he was not looking for a subordinate, but a trustworthy partner. Jinhai responded bluntly that Suho's proposal looked like a strategy to raise his market value before joining the guild. Suho admitted that there was some truth to those words, but not the whole story. He was objecting not to raise his own value, but to gain fame. His ultimate goal was to become a civil servant. Jinhai was caught off guard. Does this mean Suho is joining the Hunter Association, a civil servant? The idea of losing fame to become one seemed absurd to him. But Suho was serious. He wanted to work in the field as a member of the Hunter Association. Because of this, Jinhai questioned his background. Was Suho just another spoiled rich kid who treated hunting like a side job? Suho revealed that he was actually a gate orphan and that his past led him into public service. That made attacking the gate the purpose of his life. As Jinhai looked at the laptop, she doubted whether Suho was truly sincere. So many strange people were appearing these days that it was becoming difficult to distinguish them. However, he eventually decided that it didn't really matter. He acknowledged Suho's perspective but declined the proposal. He preferred to personally choose the stories he would cover. However, Suho did not give up. He proposed a bet. Curious, Jinhai asked what kind it was. Suho proposed that he would earn Jinhai's trust by proving himself as a hunter. He declared that he would clear the Tower of Challenges alone that very day. Jinhai was shocked. The tower was notorious. It was considered impossible to clear it even with a full party. Doing it alone seemed like absolute madness. Although he had heard it, Suho was confident that if he succeeded, it would be enough to persuade Jinhai. If he succeeded, he wanted Jinhai to become his personal reporter. Suho remembered Jinhai from his past life. She was a top-tier broadcaster at PBS, famous for her pride and elite background. She gained popularity as a reporter who never accepted bribes. However, in Suho's past life, they had collaborated several times thanks to Jinhai's sharp reporting and rare influence on public opinion. However, that very brilliance made him a dangerous presence to others, like a thorn constantly pricking someone's side. Eventually, Jinhai became entangled in political conflict, was forced into early retirement, and ultimately disappeared from the stage. This time, Suho quietly swore that he would take on that fate. During the call, Suho made a proposal. If he could conquer the Tower of Challenges alone, Jinhai had to become his personal reporter. Although surprised, Jinhai agreed. She promised that if Suho truly succeeded, she would support him with everything she had as a reporter. The call ended with Suho confidently declaring, "It is time to start now." After the call, Jinhai started to get annoyed, thinking that Suho was really driving her crazy. He kept thinking about Suho's sudden and unexpected request, and was confused as to where on earth such an idea came from. He was clearly annoyed, but he didn't completely dismiss the thought. The proposal felt sincere, and Suho didn't look like the type of person to scam anyone. Caught between frustration and curiosity, Jinhai muttered that she was really going crazy. Still thinking it was a harmless gamble, he shrugged his shoulders. If it turned out to be true, that was good. If not, it was no big deal. The scene shifts to the Tower of Challenges. Suho stands at the entrance and shows his hunter license to the gatekeeper. Seeing that Suho has come alone, the man warns him. Single-person entry is permitted, but it is dangerous. Judging by Suho's license number, he assumes that Suho has passed the final exam. The gatekeeper suggests forming a team, as injuries or more serious incidents often occur even on the lower floors, but Suho insists on entering alone. Respecting his choice, the man informs him of the 71,001 entrance fee and tells him to pay upon receiving the bill. Suho nods and thanks him. As he moves forward, the gatekeeper shouts at him to be careful and to retreat if it becomes too dangerous. Suho simply nods and walks inside. As he walks, Suho thinks about the Tower of Challenge. It is widely known as a training ground for players level 20 and below. This public gate is managed by the government to help players become stronger. Now that his level has been reset, there is no better place to start over. As he pushes the door open and steps inside, the system immediately notifies him of his entry. It informs him that he can forfeit at any time, and if he declares that he will forfeit, he will be instantly teleported back to the entrance. The very moment the system signals the start of the first floor challenge, Suho summons his sword. A slime monster appears, launches an attack. During the fight, Suho notices the monster's massive size and astonishing speed and is caught off guard in an instant. Despite being a creature with almost no attack power of even level 1, its movements are preemptive and to it. If his feet are immobilized, his speed can be slowed. Wanting to finish quickly, Suho plunges his sword into the slime's core to destroy it, but then he realizes something. This slime can multiply. That annoying characteristic means that when the core splits, it regenerates into multiple smaller versions. Even if there is a limit to how much they can split, they are still a threat. This regenerative ability is one of the reasons most players form parties to enter the tower. Monsters appear in swarms on almost every floor. Without wasting time, Suho begins to sweep away the multiplying slimes. He leaps into the air, stabs one while jumping, and throws his sword to take down another. As he falls, the slime swings its tentacles at him. Suho catches the tentacles in midair to prevent 3 of them from falling, and uses the recoil to launch himself upward with a clean, precise strike. He slices through the tentacles and deals with the remaining enemies. The system informs him that he has conquered the first floor and asks if he wants to proceed. Suho looks up at it with Joel's cold eyes. There are 48 more floors left, so there is no time to waste. Next, the system signals the start of the second floor challenge. Recalling the Tower of Challenges, Suho remembers that his highest official record in his past life was 48 floors. His current record is up to floor 29, and both records were achieved through party play. Typically, challengers enter the tower in groups, and the difficulty is determined by the number of participants. While having more party members reduces the experience points each individual gains, it is a safer method to proceed. Most hunters aiming for the highest record form parties of 20 members. With these thoughts in mind, Suho clears floor 18 and looking up at it, realizes that he does not necessarily need to follow the conventional method. Without hesitation, he accepts the challenge for floor 19 and activates the next stage. Unlike the previous floors, which were filled with various enemies, floor 2 contains only a single powerful monster. Although the opponent is stronger, this also means that he can pass the stage simply by single-handedly wiping out that monster. As soon as the monster appears, Suho charges in and wipes it out with a single sword strike. The system notifies him that floor 19 has been cleared and presents him with the option to proceed to floor 20. Instead, Suho pauses the challenge for a moment and examines the monster's corpse. He notices something strange. Unlike other monsters that vanish as soon as they fall, this monster left behind red loot. It was a clear hint that there was something more hidden within the tower. Suho retrieves an item from the wreckage, noting that it cannot be used on its own, but he realizes there is a special purpose. Using his magic detection ability, he locates a hidden space connected to a red gate. This hidden space was none other than the subspace fortress of King Jangpyeong. Unlike other subspaces created from items, this one was unique in that living beings could freely enter and exit. Upon stepping inside, Suho found himself in a cave-like space. A glowing object appeared, and the system announced that the fortress's previous owner had died. Suho was asked if he would claim ownership. He accepted, and as he grasped the glowing object, it began to fuse with his body. The system confirmed that Suho was now the new owner of the subspace fortress and that it was no longer a mere item. It had become a skill bound to him for research purposes. The system also explained that the appearance of the fortress would change according to Suho's magic power. The space begins to transform. What was once a cave turns into a fully furnished room. Impressed, Suho realizes that this space is far more sophisticated than he had anticipated. Its size expands according to his magical power and even adapts to his tastes. He feels relieved that he prevented Jang Pyongho from obtaining this power. In the past, that man had used this fortress to store everything from drugs and stolen artifacts to kidnapped people. Remembering the terror of sleepless nights caused by such crimes, Suho feels disgusted. However, now that the fortress is in his hands, he believes that such darkness will not be repeated. By preventing the appearance of the fortress king and securing a powerful personal base, Suho feels he has achieved a tremendous victory. With a renewed resolve, he prepares to continue moving forward. He was scrolling through his phone while reading an article that was becoming increasingly interesting. I noticed that recently many students have started flocking to Nexus. Suho had once said he wanted to join the alternative hunters, but this exclusive press report suggested that Nexus was confident that Suho would eventually join them. Gina felt uncertain. Only time would tell. Nevertheless, he kept thinking about how many floors Suho might have already cleared. Just then, a system notification popped up. The 30th floor had just been conquered. The Tower of Challenge record had been broken, and someone was already advancing to the 30th floor. The nearby crowd fell silent in disbelief. Whispers spread. Was it a new record, a team raid, or just an even crazier raid? Their shock deepened as the system immediately announced that the 30th floor had also been cleared. It had been only a few minutes since it began. Gina froze. If this was really Suho, he had completely misjudged him. I had dismissed Suho's victories up until now as being due to luck and showmanship. However, if this insane speed was real, Suho was a rival I would have to compete against for a long time. Inside the Hunter Association, Hisa Kim was visibly shaken upon hearing the news. She quickly checked the report. Suho was actually breaking records in real time. Realizing Suho's value, she decided that she had to make an offer so tempting that he could not refuse. She ordered the team to head to headquarters immediately after informing the chairman and the secretary general. Meanwhile, Yang Qiaomin thought that Suho climbing the Tower of Challenge so quickly was something the world had never seen before. If Suho really wanted to join the association, he was a talent that comes along once in a generation. Just then, Yang Qiaomin's phone rang. It was the vice president of the association. Curious, Yang Qiaomin answered the call. The vice president asked where he was. Upon hearing that Yang Qiaomin was near the tower in Pangyo, he seized this opportunity. He told Yang Qiaomin to bring Suho. Yang Qiaomin smiled brightly, thinking he had gotten the chance to recruit Suho, but the vice president immediately dismissed the idea. He did not want to recruit him. He merely wanted a single photo of Suho and the association president together. Then he hung up the phone, and Yang Qiaomin was plunged into shock and despair. He thought that the public viewed them as corrupt and incompetent because of these power-hungry executives. In his opinion, only hunters were qualified to lead the association. He stared at the tower and thought about how to bring Suho back. Inside the tower, Suho had just cleared the 40th floor, breaking the tower record once again. Fatigue began to weigh him down. Continuously advancing was exhausting. He wondered when this madness would end. However, as soon as he opened his status window, his energy vanished. Reaching level 39 felt like a true reward. He earned 5 bonus stamina points for every floor cleared, and each one felt like a gift. Knowing the system inside and out, it felt like raising a game character, a second self. And honestly, it was quite fun. After finishing the setup, Suho prepared for the final challenge. Floor 40 began. A shining crystal appeared before him, and from it emerged the final boss, a level 49 tower dragon. Seeing it, Suho immediately realized just how overpowered this thing was. Even without the special ability, it was ridiculously powerful simply because it was a dragon. He wondered if the second floor was really meant to be cleared, but Suho knew why he had come. He would not hesitate. Gritting his teeth and holding the giant's hand, he charged at the final boss with all his might, determined to end it all. Suho approached the dragon to confront it and prepared to attack. In response, the dragon opened fire, and Suho had to leap into the air to dodge it. While airborne, he quickly realized something important. Despite its massive size, the dragon was shockingly fast. Suddenly, a dark energy leaked from its claws, creating a powerful gravitational pull that dragged Suho straight toward its jaw. Just before being sucked in, Suho grabbed the dragon's mouth and he slammed the giant down with all his might. The dragon thrashed furiously, shaking its head so violently that Suho was sent flying far away, forcing him to retreat to safety. Catching his breath, Suho realized a worrying fact. Even his strongest blow had failed to leave a single scratch. All he had done was annoy the creature. Then, the dragon struck the ground with overwhelming force, creating a deep fissure in the floor. Hiding behind a large rock, Suho quietly thanked himself for his high stats. Without them, he would have been instantly killed by the shockwave. He quickly realized that while the dragon's level wasn't incredibly high, its body was absurdly sturdy due to its innate traits. Ordinary attacks were useless. He had to target its weak point, the spirit scales. Since this dragon wasn't yet level 100, it wouldn't be able to completely conceal those scales. After scanning its body, Suho found a vulnerability near its tail. Without a moment's delay, he charged forward and struck the rock-hard scales with all his might. The dragon howled in pain, and a system alert popped up. The tower dragon entered a state of rage as its weak point was attacked. Knowing that the fight would not end quickly, Suho left it trapped deep within Youngren's massive structure. Dragging out this battle would only make things more dangerous. He infused more power into it and pushed his blade deeper. The enraged dragon activated its fear-based ability. Suho's body froze, and he fell into a hallucinatory state. The system confirmed that he was afflicted with fear. He tried to treat himself. However, the system announced that it could not release such a high level of fear. Before the dragon could break the gate with its tail, Suho opened the entrance to the subspace and disappeared inside. He immediately drank the purification potion. As the system confirmed the potion's effect, the hallucination disappeared. Relieved, he reminded himself that only those he authorized could enter this subspace. He had bought that potion carelessly at a regular shop, never imagining he would need it so soon. The fight was far more intense than expected. Releasing the fear state once did not grant immediate resistance, and healing spells were of no use. This meant he would have to repeatedly retreat into the subspace and rely on purification potions, a clearly unsustainable method. He needed a different plan. Searching through his inventory, he briefly considered summoning a mad crushing scholar. Before he could make a decision, the system notified him that he had learned a basic crafting formula from a skill book, and a crafting jar appeared. Understanding its importance, he placed 3 unique items into the jar: the unknown thief's sock, the unknown bard's instrument, and the unknown sweeper's broom. The jar began the fusion process. Suho knew that combinations using the absolute formula always succeeded. Many things called so-called trash items actually possessed hidden value. The process concluded successfully. A rare treasure was created, a ring formed by the base-level formula First Mumu. Suho also received a bonus stamina point heat system as a reward for crafting the first item. He understood that first items are usually S grade or higher, and since this was a growth-type item, it was S+ grade. He equipped the ring, and the system immediately bound it to him. Suho remembered that in his previous life, he had missed the opportunity to obtain First Mumu because a mad crushing scholar discovered it first and revealed the recipe. This time, Suho claimed it himself. With additional stamina, he opened the status window and added 4 points of magic stamina to make it white. The system congratulated him. His magic stamina turned red, a level he had never reached before level 50. He had previously thought that a purple stamina would take forever, but now he felt it was fully achievable. Purple required 700 points. It was still a long journey, but he was confident that he could reach it. After completing the step distribution, Suho summoned a familiar ancient spear and began infusing it with magical power. The weapon absorbed power at an astonishing speed. Upon reaching the required amount, the system signaled a successful awakening. The spear transformed. It was now the Shadow Spear. This round was about to begin. The system revealed the weapon's origin. It was one of the Shadow Lord's treasures, crafted from the bones of a shadow beast, and recognized Suho as the first awakener. Now, the spear could be summoned from his shadow and regenerated using magical power and shadow energy. Suho immediately understood the weapon's value. Just as Champyong possessed the subspace fortress, the Shadow Lord, a monarch-level being, wielded this spear. If that being was inside the gate, Suho was now holding his signature weapon. He felt fortunate to have secured it before a dangerous entity could claim it. It was time for the test. He summoned the spear again, marveling at its convenience. Since he could not attack inside the subspace fortress, he had to go outside and strike Youngmin while the dragon was asleep. Suho exited the subspace and climbed onto a rocky ledge overlooking the beast. Raising the shadow spear, he threw it straight toward the stone embedded in the dragon's tail. The spear pierced deep, and the dragon writhed in pain. Suho. When the system notified that the dragon had entered a rage state again, it took off. It emitted the dragon's terror, but Suho immediately retreated into subspace to avoid all status effects. His hit-and-run tactics continued. Suho attacked repeatedly and retreated every time. The process took longer than expected, but soon, Youngmin's durability dropped below 10%. It was not completely destroyed, but it became too weak to protect the dragon. Silver arrows would no longer work. Suho abandoned stealth and launched a full-scale attack. Leaping out of the fortress, he sprang into the air and plunged his shadow spear into the dragon's eye. The shock shook the entire region. Suho was flung backward, but the enraged dragon was tenacious. While it was searching for him, Suho seized the moment, turned around, and lunged at its tail. The dragon used Dragon's Fear again, but Suho shattered the stone into pieces first. The system confirmed it. The spirit was destroyed and the dragon's power rapidly drained away. Suho drank a purification potion and sped into the air for the finishing blow. With a clean exhaust across its throat, the dragon fell. The battle was finally over. The system declared that Suho had cleared floor 49 and set a new record in the Tower of Challenges. I received a bonus step point stack, and more rewards started pouring in. Lying on the ground, he ruminated on his achievement. He had conquered the entire tower, something neither his past nor present self had been able to accomplish. As a reward for reaching level 40, he acquired a new skill, Spirit of Healing. This was an area of effect healing ability that, once mastered, could cover the entire battlefield. The evaluation was not yet over. Recognizing the difficulty of his feat, the system rewarded him with dragon's blood. Suho was shocked. This was the signature signature power of the monster player demon. Then the demon must have obtained this from the Dragon Mountains. The system explained that inheriting dragon blood grants the dragon's power depending on how much the user pushes themselves. Before Suho could even summon the Shadow Spear again, the system warned him. The weapon was reacting to the Tower Dragon's shadow. It underwent another transformation as it completely absorbed the Shadow Spear Plus. A hidden ability called Shadow Devour, which was not in the original description, became stronger. A part of the weapon's nature awakened. Suho checked the updated stats and was astonished. Both Shadow Binding and Shadow Regeneration had risen from A rank to S rank. Shadow Bind now tore off and fixed the target's shadow, and Shadow Songani bit the shadow, inflicting continuous slash damage. The growth-type weapon truly surpassed standard equipment. Just as the satisfied Guardian was about to leave, a massive Songani drop to the ground caught his eye. The system identified it as a powerful dragon Songani capable of inflicting an unhealable debuff that nullified all healing. Guardian was astonished once again. He had obtained a dragon byproduct, which was considered nearly impossible to acquire. This confirmed that the tower's dragon was a nun-dragon that naturally dropped materials. The entire battle was a jackpot. Having gathered everything, Guardian finally turned around, convinced that Jin's reporter was waiting outside. At that moment, the tower's crystal shattered, and the system calmly declared that the Tower of Realization had been conquered. The conqueror was a player named Guardian, and all other players were forcibly expelled from the gate. A portal appeared, and several hunters with expressions of astonishment were there. He bounced back and rolled across the floor. One of them knelt, clutching his head in disbelief, and muttered that it didn't make sense for someone to have entered the Tower of Realization alone. His teammate, lying face down on the floor, asked who on earth Suho was. The hunter simply pointed ahead and asked if the person standing over there was that person. His partner turned his head, saying there was so much lymph that there wasn't even room to breathe. Since he wasn't there, he quietly confirmed that it was undoubtedly that person. The protagonist was now completely surrounded by reporters. Camera flashes were going off incessantly, and everyone was shouting at him, asking for his thoughts and reactions regarding the conquest. However, Suho quietly reflected on how exhausted he was. He had suffered far more damage than expected from the dragon in the tower, and what he truly needed right now was rest. He was absolutely not a member of the shouting press. He hadn't expected reporters to swarm in like this. His gaze was. He headed toward reporter Jin Hai, who was sitting dramatically on his car and making a genuinely shocked expression. Psycho, the idea that someone had conquered that tower alone was unrealistic, so it was probably the first thought that crossed his mind. Suho approached him from behind as if nothing were wrong, placed his hand on his shoulder, and greeted him. Jin Hai screamed and collapsed to the floor in terror, then realized who it was and opened her eyes wide in disbelief. She stammered out Suho's name and asked how he had escaped Impa. Suho smiled lightly and said he had slipped out. He explained it as if he had executed a secret, ultimate stealth technique to disappear without leaving a single footprint. Suho reached out his hand and asked if AE Jinhai still didn't believe him. The reporter looked at him as if he were a madman, slowly extended a hand, and asked if he realized he sounded like one. Suho calmly replied that if Jinhai really didn't trust him, she should just tell him and he would adjust accordingly. Jinhai stood up, brushed off the dust, and said that if he hadn't trusted her, he wouldn't have helped him this far. She then hurriedly told him to get in the car before the reporters noticed. Suho received a call from team leader Chialman while in a moving car. He congratulated Suho on clearing the Tower of Realization and confessed that he had wanted to meet him in person to thank him, but Suho had disappeared too quickly. Suho politely expressed his gratitude, explaining that he had been hiding because he was tired. Chialman smiled and said that Suho always exceeds expectations. He asked if Suho was still in Pangyo and if he wanted to meet. Suho explained that a friend had come to pick him up and then asked if there was anything in particular he wanted to discuss. Chialmin confided that there was nothing special but asked if Suho could stop by the association if he wasn't too tired. Suho paused for a moment and asked him to repeat it. Chialmin confirmed that he could. He explained that this was an unprecedented event. Everyone believed the Tower of Realization was unclearable, and it had been functioning as a public gate. Given the scale, an investigation was necessary. Suho retorted that he had no recollection of an investigation being conducted when a large guild cleared a difficult gate. If necessary information is needed, couldn't they just request it for a moment? After a moment of silence, Chialman agreed and told him to get some good sleep. Suho thanked him and hung up the phone. Leaning against the wall, he thought to himself, I thought the chairman or vice chairman must have called me for a photo shoot and promotion. He respected Chialman, but he had no intention of doing anything for these people. If he allowed them to drag him into the bureaucracy now, he would surely face repercussions. He planned to avoid it until he officially joined the Hunter Association. While driving, Jaina looked at him and asked if she could ask him something. Suho nodded and told her to go ahead. Gina said that with Suho's abilities, he could go anywhere, especially to a government position. Suho smiled. The government pays well, and no matter how strong the private guilds pretend to be, the government actually grants them more power. Gina blinked and reminded him that the private guilds possess reputation and influence. Suho replied calmly, "Reputation is temporary and nothing more than a staged spotlight. The private guilds may look like heroes now, but eventually the public will not respect them. They will come to fear them." Gina slowly nodded, saying that Suho had a point. Suho sighed and continued, "If he wants to end the gate crisis, he needs support. He cannot do it alone." That was the reason he chose the government association. Gina smiled, saying that since there is no other player with the same sense of duty and conviction as Suho, he will gain a massive 2 points. Suho healed his arm with a small healing spell and thanked him. Then Gina asked if he planned to apply through the general recruitment process. He said that it was a waste for someone like Suho to take on an emergency medical field position. Suho. He answered that he wasn't applying for that. I guessed he was aiming for grade 7, but Suho replied that he wanted grade 5. I almost shouted at him, "Are you serious?" Suho told him to stop asking if he was serious every 2 seconds. He looked at him with curious eyes and said that it was only natural to want to know the reason. Suho smiled lightly and said he would explain, but advised against writing about it in the article. He also told me to focus on driving. After hearing the story for a while, reporter Gina was surprised by Suho's plan and said it was a good idea. And the protagonist calmly answered yes, but said that it should not be published in the article yet because he wanted to make an official announcement through him later. And when that time came, it would naturally shake everything up, meaning that Gina would secure exclusive reporting rights before anyone else in the company. Gina looked at him and asked if Suho planned to squeeze every last drop of profit out of her, to which Suho simply replied that if they were friends, they should naturally use that fact to their advantage. Gina smiled and said fine. After Suho said she could use him to her heart's content, he suddenly asked if she wanted to go home now, knowing that his personal information had already been leaked and countless people would be waiting near her house. The protagonist smiled and answered nonchalantly that he could simply disappear again, just as he had done in the tower. However, Gina hesitated and asked Suho if he would like to stay with her for the time being. He explained that he lived alone in a large house. The guest room was beautifully decorated and had such strict security that no one could break in. Suho paused for a moment and asked exactly where he lived, and he proudly replied that his home was Qingdam Kaiser. Suho couldn't help but be genuinely astonished at the thought that it was a top-tier luxury apartment worth hundreds of billions of won. As soon as he arrived, Suho stepped inside and froze for a moment. It wasn't because he was impressed, but because the place looked like the home of a golden spoon, like the final boss. A kind of luxury that doesn't show off. It simply exists, waiting for you to look at it. Gina welcomed him as if nothing were wrong, telling him to make himself comfortable as if it were his own home, and Suho nodded, reminding himself in his heart that this was the life of someone whose premium DLC had been activated since birth. Gina noticed the device conveniences neatly arranged on the table. He pointed to the function pad through the community app installed there. Suho could order food, shop, call the support team, and summon an emergency healer if necessary. Gina added that Suho looks much better now than when he first got in the car. Suho simply replied that he is a healer. He blinked and asked again, and Suho repeated in a slightly irritated voice that he really was a healer. The reporter apologized, admitting that although he had read it somewhere, his brain still refused to believe it. In any case, healers usually joined a guild first to level up safely. They don't just casually clear the Tower of Realization alone. Picking up his bag, the rich man said he had to return to the office for work and reminded Suho of the password. Suho told him not to worry and wished him a safe trip. As the door closed after he left Suho, finally he opened the system window and checked his status. He decided that it was time to distribute the stamina points obtained from clearing the tower. He balanced his stamina with other stats and poured the remaining points into his senses. At this level, it was no longer a simple elite route. It was the path of a successor, and even he himself had to admit that his stash now looked ridiculously good. After dealing with that, Suho switched to another task. He was skilled at detecting old surveillance equipment, and with his newly enhanced senses, he will probably be able to detect anything. And even if I trusted Jaini, I wasn't foolish enough to assume with absolute certainty that the house of a second-generation keyball would be perfectly clean. Rather than dying, it is better to be paranoid. After checking all the details for a while, Suho finally threw himself onto the sofa, completely exhausted. The house was massive, much larger than most of the subspace mansions he had seen before. Honestly, finding the hidden camera felt harder than killing that dragon earlier. When no devices were detected, he finally relaxed but his. The phone kept ringing. Notifications poured in ceaselessly. Upon checking, Suho realized that his personal information had been leaked. Someone had exposed his number, and the messages did not stop. Accepting the situation, he decided that he needed a new phone and a new number. Suho, remembering the community app Gina had mentioned, used it. He looked at it, and surprisingly, it was very efficient. He transferred important things to the new device and designated it for private use. Messages continued to pour into his phone, but he planned to change his number soon. He glanced at the time. It was a little past 5 p.m. Before leaving again, he briefly thought there was real time. Meanwhile, that night, a mysterious gate appeared inside a quiet building elsewhere. Several masked figures walked out through it. They cautiously surveyed the surroundings. There were no witnesses. There was no surveillance. Nothing. Then they opened the bags they had brought and the seasoned. They began planting the bombs with precision. While they were installing everything, Suho appeared behind them nonchalantly, as if he had entered an ordinary meeting rather than a terrorist operation. He said that blowing up a public building was not a very good idea. The masked group froze immediately. They were confused because the building was supposed to be empty today. Suho agreed that is usually the case, but said he had come expecting something like this. Panic erupted. A man shouted for everyone to retreat and ran toward the gate. A girl in the group staggered and collapsed to the ground. Her teammates hesitated, asking if she had tripped. One tried to lift her up, but she wouldn't budge. Another insisted they drag her away quickly, but the girl's legs were rooted to the ground and wouldn't move. They didn't know it yet, but Suho had already used shadow bind to bind her with dark energy. Still struggling, the man shouted that something was wrong, and the girl muttered a cold word. Leave her behind. The man refused to leave her behind, but the girl stubbornly insisted that Suho be killed. The remaining three, engulfed in panic, charged forward together. But before they even took their first step, it was invisible. A force of silence pressed them down to the ground. Suho's intimidation skill immediately overwhelmed them. Having subdued them, Suho asked if they were members of the Banshee. The narration explained, the Banshee were a notorious terrorist group responsible for bombings and chaos. Although they were eventually captured in the past, the damage they inflicted was immense, and only 4 members were responsible for it all. The group was shocked. Someone recognized them and demanded that Suho reveal how he knew their names. Suho calmly approached the nearest man and removed his hat. He revealed that he was Kwak Duwoo, the muscle man, who worked as a day laborer handling heavy lifting. Next, Suho pointed to another person, Seok Yuen, a bomb maker working as a middle school science teacher. Next was Kim Hyun Min, the transport man, an ordinary delivery driver who disappears using a movement skill after an attack. Finally, Suho turned to Gu Hyuna, a college student and the true leader of the Banshee. Her EMP ability easily neutralized electronic equipment and magical support. Horrified, Yona demanded to know how Suho knew everything. Suho smiled and said that anyone can uncover anything if they try hard enough, and that she already knew it. Still not believing him, she demanded once again that he reveal his identity. Suho acknowledged her quick wits and reminded her that she already knew the answer, shouting that if she still didn't believe him, he could hand her over to the authorities right now to prove it. Realizing he wasn't bluffing, she finally asked what he wanted. Suho remarked that she should have agreed earlier and pointed out that this wasn't a good place to talk. He told her to retrieve the bomb and suggested they talk at their hideout instead. She looked at him, wondering how much information he knew, but finally agreed. Suho turned to Hyun Min and asked if he could move now, telling him to open the door since, of course, he wouldn't be taking a taxi. As they entered the hideout, Suho told everyone to relax and take off their masks if they wanted. Yona refused, but she soon threw off her mask, saying she did it not because he ordered her to, but simply because the room felt stifling. She demanded an answer again. How did he know who they were? How did he approach them? And why would someone known for conquering the gates be chasing a terrorist organization? Suho smiled and admitted that she had asked too many questions at once and he didn't know where to start. He said that he had tracked and identified them using his own skills, which he had not publicly revealed, just as they had hidden theirs. Finally focusing, she asked again what he wanted. Suho made a proposal. He wanted them to work with him. He mentioned a recent PBS interview and the future plans he shared there. Yuna thought that this meant he was joining the Hunter Association. Suho confirmed this and made it clear that he was not handing them over for forced conscription before she could get confused. He explained that after taking the grade 5 exam and going through 1 or 2 positions, they would eventually join the special forces. Yona looked astonished, and Suho told him not to make that face. He knew they hated the special forces, and that was why their bombings targeted related locations. He understood as he shared the same reason. Suho revealed the truth. He was a gate orphan. He had thought it was a coincidence until he later learned that the ritual had been intentionally created. The gate. Every time it was cleared, that land became a top-tier real estate property. The government knew a gate shock was coming, yet they let it slide for the sake of profit. Behind it was a development project, and Suho already knew who was in charge. So his goal was simple: to become the head of the special forces and make those responsible pay the price. He explained that the special forces have the highest authority within the association, can influence other government agencies, and can prosecute Hunter. He limited his revenge to a strategic and legal path, rather than reckless terrorism. However, Yona pointed out that there was still no guarantee Suho would pass the grade 5 exam. Suho told her to wait and see. He ended the conversation with a final warning that if they attacked again, he would hand them over directly to the government. Inwardly, Suho thought they had moved past the shock. In his past life, the Banshee was an untouchable, ghost-like presence. During the interrogation, he realized that they were people just like him, victims twisted by revenge who had become villains. Had someone guided them earlier, the situation might not have deteriorated to this extent. Therefore, this time, Suho planned to change their course before they completely crossed the line. He was convinced that Yona would accept it, no matter how long it took. His offer was incredibly attractive, and his capabilities were undeniable. He told them to think carefully and make a wise choice. The scene then shifts to the Korean Hunter Association. The vice chairman, already in a bad mood, reprimanded team leader Yang Cheolmin for failing to handle a simple matter, and reminded him that even the chairman had cleared his entire schedule to meet on Suho. He let it slide this time, but firmly stated that if the same mistake were repeated, there would be consequences. All Cheolmin could do was bow his head, accept the warning, and listen to the order to step down from his post and return to work. As soon as he stepped outside, sighing in exhaustion, he wondered how long he had to sit and listen to complaints. And for a moment, he seriously considered quitting everything and joining a civilian guild. However, he soon reminded himself why he had joined the Hunter Association in the first place. Thinking that having survived so much, there was no way he couldn't endure this one miserable moment, he whispered to himself to keep going. Just then, Pai Seong-ryul, the head of the Special Investigation Department, suddenly appeared and placed his hand on his shoulder. Already annoyed, Cheolmin wondered why he had to run into this person right now. Pretending nothing was wrong, he asked in a polite tone what brought him there, and Head Pai replied with his usual playful demeanor that he had heard rumors that his beloved team leader Yang had been nagged again. He even praised team leader Yang's patience in enduring the old man's incessant nagging, but team leader Yang immediately took full responsibility, claiming everything was his fault. Together, while walking, Skin Manager changed the subject and mentioned the rumors that Suho was causing trouble, but Suho clarified that he wasn't exactly causing any trouble. However, it was true that the story was spreading rapidly. Chief Pai pointed out that only a few people knew about it and casually offered help. When Cheolmin asked what he meant, the head of the skin department made a preposterous proposal. He simply told Suho to accuse him of any charge. It was a suggestion to bring the writings in for the newspaper and settle the matter later. According to Director Pai, the important thing was to make the process appear neat and controlled. The chairman would also be pleased if Suho were summoned. It would look like the problem had been resolved, and with Suho being released later, the association could project an image of authority. He added that since Suho wanted to join the Hunter Association anyway, it would be beneficial to everyone involved. Team leader Yang glanced at the text and cautiously remarked that Director Pai's idea was mischievous, noting that messing with a successful person like Suho could backfire tremendously. However, Chief Pai did not flinch and instead praised team leader Yang's morality, asking why someone in his position had to be so anxious over a mere hunter. Team leader Yang replied politely, but Chief P still had more to say. He reminded him that prosecutors still had the authority to investigate investigate and indict hunters, and that there was a reason hunters once feared them, implying that team leader Yang should be more flexible rather than being bound solely by regulations. After a tense silence, team leader Yang nodded and said he would keep it in mind. The skin manager promised support and he left after reminding them that there is always an alternative to strictly following the rules. Left alone, team leader Yang quietly reflected on everything. He had once respected Chief Skin as one of the few hunters within the association who possessed a sense of reality, unlike the elites at the top who were detached from the truth. But now I could not be certain. Knowledge changes a person, and because Chief P knew too much, he had become a dangerous figure. Feeling anxious, team leader Yang went outside, found a quiet place to sit, and fell into thought. His thoughts turned to Suho. He had initially supported the association, but suddenly distanced himself. It was about the matter he had started to set. It was not surprising, given that major guilds offered massive benefits capable of swaying anyone, but team leader Yang wondered what Suho was really thinking. Meanwhile, Suho, having gotten out of a taxi elsewhere, activated the ring called First Mumu on his finger and recalled how reckless he had been when he first activated it. However, now that he had conquered the Tower of Challenge, he had perfectly mastered its usage. It was time to move. He walked toward the Seoul Central Blood Center building and his magic. Activate the sensor key. He scanned the surroundings and finally found a faint trace of magical power. Since gates naturally emit magical energy, even hidden gates leave traces behind. Following the signal, Suho discovered a faint gate hidden like mist. It was a gate that required specific conditions to open. He drew his knife without hesitation, cut his palm, and let the blood drip toward the gate. This was because he already knew that this gate demanded blood. Upon absorbing sufficient blood, the system indicated that the conditions were met. A hidden gate was discovered and Suho gained bonus stamina points for his ultimate skill. The gate was named the Blood Spirit. Upon entering, Suho threw glowing powder forward to illuminate the cavernous environment. The first area was clearly a cave, and as he ventured deeper, an unidentified liquid fell from above. When he looked up, it wasn't cave water, it was saliva. Floating above his head were countless blood-sucking bites of around level 63, and Suho stood swayed by this magnificent illusion. He activated his feat skill without hesitation, and immediately all the bites lost control and plummeted to the ground. He calmly approached a single bite, pierced its body with a shadow spear, and allowed the spear to swallow the shadow, killing every bite in the room at once. Opening his status window, he felt a sense of satisfaction. This method was perfect for wiping out the monsters. With an S-rank feat skill, the level difference was meaningless. Most hunters focused on two main stats, but Suho deciphered the color-coded entire stat system and planned to raise all stats evenly. Reviewing his stats again, he wondered if his level was too ridiculous to merely hunt a stray. Checking the combat gear of curiosity, he noticed something strange. There was blood slime among the corpses. He must have accidentally died after being caught in Yi-Hyop's shockwave while hiding among the bats. The cleanup was tedious, but he acknowledged the usefulness of Yi-Hyop's skill. While high-level monsters could resist the fear effect, this skill remained effective unless the opponent fell into a special category. Soon, he arrived at the boss room and felt his excitement rising. He entered without hesitation. The moment he stepped inside, he summoned a sword, and a massive vampire bat immediately lunged at him. He blocked the attack, confirmed it was the Great King Vampire Bat, and counterattacked with a swift slash. Just then, a golem rushed in from behind, and the Guardian. I had to dodge to the side. Neither of the two monsters felt like a real boss. They were mid-bosses. He faced both at the same time. He slashed the golem and countered Park Ji's attack with a spinning spin. As the golem attempted to throw a punch, Suho slid back to dodge, then thrust his sword into the ground, unleashing a shockwave that shook the entire room and struck both monsters. He thought the fight was over, but as the dust cleared, the two monsters were still standing. The battle intensified, and Suho quickly realized that physical attacks alone could not finish off high-level targets. It was time to use what he had prepared. Just then, two enemies attacked simultaneously, one from the front, the other from behind. Suho summoned another sword, and when the explosion subsided, he thrust one into Park Ji and the other into the golem. Although repeated attacks could not finish them off, Suho finally grasped the core issue. Their weakness was Su, who had been infused with divine power. At that very moment, the system signaled that the divine power had been successfully bestowed. The The silver sword embedded in Parkji's body glowed and lightning struck down upon it, severing its neck. He slashed and instantly obliterated the monster. Suho stood over the corpse, stomped on its head, and watched it explode like a worm bitten by a giant hand. The divine power was destructive. The golem charged again, but Suho moved first, slicing it into pieces with his divine-infused sword, and the system finally confirmed its defeat. Looking down at his weapon, he acknowledged just how perfectly it worked. The healer-exclusive skill enabling divine enchantment became an incredibly powerful advantage, and silver. When divine power was imbued into the weapon, every attack became a guaranteed critical hit, making it a perfect counter to the enemies of this gate. Suddenly, Suho felt a powerful presence behind him, and when he turned around, he realized that the true boss of the hidden gate had finally appeared. The figure walked forward, radiating killing intent, and revealed himself as the Cursed Prince, a level 76 monster elite. Enraged that Suho had trespassed into his territory and massacred his subordinates, he demanded that Suho kneel and confess his sins. However, Suho had not come to bow his head to him, but to capture him. That confidence drove the prince into a corner, and he unleashed his power with a furious roar and called Suho unbearably arrogant. The first attack flew in fiercely, but Suho lightly blocked it, and he calmly asked the prince if his dramatic entrance was over. Instead of answering, the prince buried his hands in the ground, and suddenly the battlefield shifted as a protective fog rose from all directions, completely engulfing Alasia. Due to the thick aura, movement could not be detected by ordinary means, and Suho prepared for the prince, knowing he could attack from any direction. He sensed something behind him and reacted instantly the moment the prince charged, perfectly blocking the attack. The boss, unable to understand how Suho had predicted his attack, was left in shock. Suho confidently counterattacked, believing he had delivered a clean blow, but the prince merely laughed and mocked him, saying such a weak attack could never wound him. Just then, a system warning flashed. The cursed prince had activated Blood Scream. Suho immediately plunged his sword into the ground and activated Healing Soul. A purifying energy burst forth, and as Suho's wounds completely vanished, the prince reacted noticeably to the sensation. In any case, smiling, Suho revealed that he was actually a healer. The prince looked down and was horrified to discover the wound in his abdomen. It was proof that Suho's attack had finally worked, although Suho had prepared another technique. Enraged by the sense of injustice of being wounded by a mere human, the prince shouted and charged forward. Suho confronted him head-on, and as his sword clashed against the prince's hooked claws, the two exchanged brutal attacks at high speed. For a moment, the prince believed he was winning and unleashed a barrage of rapid strikes, but Suho suddenly vanished, reappearing behind him to deliver a clean blow. Blood gushed from the prince's mouth as he staggered backward, and Suho immediately rushed in to continue the assault. Refusing to retreat, the prince unleashed even greater power and charged forward again. The two collided with immense force, sending a shockwave across the entire battlefield. The scene changed in an instant as they landed. The cursed prince's head detached from his body and rolled across the floor. Suho approached calmly. He sat stretched out next to the severed head and mocked how much Seungri had rested, but suddenly the head lunged forward and bit his hand. The prince, still alive, cursed Suho in his heart, demanded his blood, and promised to make him his slave. Feeling extreme revulsion, Suho tore off the head and tossed it aside, thinking it was no different from the neck the prince had bitten without warning. Just then, the system signaled the start of the transformation into a familiar. Suho collapsed to the ground as blood rapidly drained from his body, and dizziness ended. A throbbing headache struck him, and an intense thirst grew in his throat. In his mind, the prince declared that it was already too late, but Suho refused to listen and told him to shut up. While the kinship process continued, Suho reminded himself that the synchronization rate had to reach a specific threshold to acquire vampire traits. And once that threshold was reached, he had to immediately purify the infection with holy water. When the kinship reached 50%, Suho believed he had almost acquired the traits and reached out his hand toward the bottle, but it suddenly shattered into pieces. The prince laughed and said that this was his territory, and that nothing Suho did now would be of any use. Suho realized that the prince was much more cautious than expected. The destroyed hallway was now restored, and even the prince's body had disappeared. Everything was reset for the next stage. Still refusing to give up, Suho tried to plan his next move, but the system. He warned that his blood was now beginning to corrupt. The overconfident prince declared that there was no escape, but Suho revealed that he still had one last card left. The system reacted immediately. All conditions to unlock the second power of dragon blood were met. He had reached level 50 and survived a life-threatening situation both mentally and physically. A new notification appeared. Dragon Gabot available. Suho smiled shrilly and realized he had activated it at the perfect moment. The detoxification stopped on the spot, and the system confirmed once again that all conditions to unlock the Dragon Blood stage were met. The Dragon Gabot was activated. He now possessed the dragon nature and dragon skin granted through the Gabot. The moment the dragon nature effect activated, further assimilation was blocked and purification began. The corrupted blood within him was converted into pure blood and absorbed into his system, while the remaining corruption was completely destroyed thanks to the dragon blood effect. Suho had successfully mastered the unknown power hidden within the corrupted vampire's blood and felt his body growing lighter. He remembered that he had planned to use the level 50 custom gate to unlock the Dragon Blood stage, but instead, he had unexpectedly found himself here. Upon examining the newly unlocked skill, he saw Dragon's Talent, a unique trait granted only to descendants of the dragon bloodline, symbolizing meatiness and superiority. While active, it grants immunity to infection and corruption, and can automatically absorb corrupted sources to purify, heal, and evolve the system. Although the conditions for the second awakening had never been shown, Suho learned them from the dragon horse. Since becoming a familiar posed a life-threatening threat, the system recognized it as an activation condition. His innate talent purified the blood, but it also preserved the vampire power within it. He checked the currently sealed vampire-related skills. This is that he. It was proof that he had nearly become a vampire, and he wondered whether or not he had technically acquired it. The original goal was to acquire vampire traits, but it was clear that dragon blood and vampire blood could still not completely coexist. The skills he acquired were powerful enough, so he accepted them. Another new skill, Blood Jeffon. It appeared this is a rare ability that can only be used by vampires of the noble class or higher, but it required a massive amount of blood. He concluded that he would have to hunt a large number of monsters and devised a plan to develop them alongside the Shadow of Illusion. Just then, the cursed prince began muttering to himself again, and Suho told him to stop, saying his rambling was annoying and incomprehensible. The prince lamented and questioned how Suho was still alive after being bitten, muttered about the curse, and called himself useless. At that moment, Suho realized that this stage was beginning. The system confirmed it. The cursed king laments his fate. His power soars dramatically. Suddenly, rain fell from above, and amidst that crimson downpour, the cursed king, now level 80, reappears to destroy, burn, and trample every being superior to him into the pit. He spewed out rage, declaring that he would throw it away. His wounded wings spread, and a chilling scream echoed through the room. Suho immediately sensed an overwhelming surge of magical power. This was no longer the same monster. The cursed king had evolved into a completely new being. The king fired an attack of dark power that caused a massive explosion. However, as the dust cleared, Suho vanished and reappeared in the air above the king's wings, unleashing a destructive sword strike. Yet, the cursed king did not react, claiming that such a simple blow could not defeat him. Suho realized that his intelligence, as well as his strength, was growing. The king swung his wings like weapons, striking Suho far away with immense force. Suho straightened his stance and immediately perceived the danger. As the king charged with another attack, Suho blocked the assault head-on with his sword, activated his divine power, and declared that his divinity would surpass all the king's strength. However, the next moment, the cursed king shattered Suho's weapon into pieces, sneering that divine power meant nothing to him now. Suho quickly stepped back to analyze the situation. The fact that a weapon imbued with divine power had broken like glass meant that ordinary weapons were no longer effective. He summoned his damage sword without hesitation. Upon seeing this, the cursed king erupted in rage, launching another brutal attack and demanding that Suho hand it over. However, Suho had infused the damage sword with divine power to learn that attack, leaving the king in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Suho finally understood. A damage weapon's history and durability are determined by its stats, and at his current level, the sword had already reached red rarity, which was sufficient to end this fight. The cursed king created a spear of damage, swore to tear Suho to shreds, and charged forward. The attack approached rapidly, but Suho transformed his damage sword into a shield to block the spear, and the king was astonished once again. Suho said that he was not the only one who could transform damage weapons. Gently turning the shield back into a sword, he learned the cursed king's neck with a single, decisive, and clean movement. The king's severed head fell to the ground, but it still wore a twisted smile filled with arrogance and confidently asserted that cutting it off was meaningless. Suho simply kicked the head across the floor, rolled it, and summoned a shadow spear to thrust it into the earth. Immediately, chains shot out and violently struck the severed head. Wrapped up, the shadow restraint fixed it in place. Suho knew he had to finish the job before the monster caused more trouble. The system announced that the vampire's blood had been activated, and that the absorbed blood was now stored in the damaged ogre. While the cursed king screamed at Suho to take his hands off, Suho looked closely around the damaged ogre. It was the first time he had seen it firsthand, and a massive amount of blood had already gathered. According to the Blood King, it could only be seen by the owner of the damaged ogre. The Blood King himself was once an ordinary healer working at the Central Blood Research Institute, but fate had led him to the Gate Blood Side Spirit. He reached the boss room but failed to defeat the cursed king and was bitten, becoming a vampire. Usually it meant death, because once bitten, the victim becomes a monster and the gate is sealed for research purposes. However, the Blood King used his healing abilities to resist the curse and neutralize the transformation into a familiar. At that moment, a new vampire skill awakened and reconfigured his entire stamina system. With his new power, he defeated the cursed king and conquered the gate, becoming known as the Blood King, a global villain feared worldwide. Eventually, Suho captured him and extracted all the crucial information regarding familiarization, damaged weapons, and vampire damage. However, the cursed king remained enraged, vowing revenge and refusing to accept the power. Suho welcomed the challenge, telling him to go ahead. Then the system was activated. The shadow of illusion resonated with the shadow of the cursed king and completely absorbed it until not even a trace remained. With that, Suho acknowledged that the damage counterforce had finally been conquered. The system confirmed the capture of the hidden gate and declared Suho the MVP. An exit gate formed in front of him. As he prepared to leave, Suho looked back on everything. Once again, he was reminded of the overwhelming reality of the dragon's power. No matter how terrifying the kinification might have looked, it was insignificant compared to the damage inflicted by the dragon. However, I was annoyed that the vampire escaped, and at that time the system. Special rewards were announced. After analyzing Suho's talent, the system granted him a skill perfectly suited to him and awarded him bonus stamina for his achievements. He had never heard of the new skill, New Blood, or Suho. As he scrolled through the system window, he realized its value. It was a total jackpot for his future. Not only that, he also acquired an S-rank original vampire skill, Blood. It was something that even a monarch had never possessed. His vampire traits were merely A+, and he was not given the titles of royal or original. Suho concluded that this was likely due to the unique effect of New Blood. Originally, the plan was to monopolize powerful existing skills, but the reality was much better. However, I vowed to myself not to let my guard down, as there is no guarantee that things will always be this way just because they are going well now. Having attacked the gate and secured the objective, Suho said exactly what needed to be said. Now that they had gained what they needed to gain, it was time to have a big showdown at the Nexus. The scene shifts to the massive skyscraper known as the Nexus, and as Sui Yang leads the group, people steadily move along the corridors. Through the open door, a man was seen sitting quietly in a chair. He was the guild master and told Miss Sui to come in. She informed him that Hunter and Suho had asked her to deliver a message, that he would be coming to join the guild tomorrow. The man repeated the words in disbelief, doubting if he had heard correctly. As he received the news, the back of his chair was turned toward them, and finally he opened his mouth to say that proper preparations were necessary. When he finally turned around and his face became visible, he added that since no one knew what plans this man and Suho was plotting, everything had to be handled carefully before he changed his mind. Outside, tall buildings stretched toward the sky, and the scene was elegant and we transitioned into a well-decorated room. Suho stood at the entrance and peered inside, discovering Jinho sprawled out on the sofa, drooling. Suho looked for a moment and finally asked if he was sleeping here. The reporter sat listlessly on the sofa and explained that Suho had conquered the Tower of Realization today, and although temporarily, they were now living together. Moreover, above all else, Suho was his partner. As he spoke, the young man happily hugged the bottle and declared that celebration was absolutely necessary on such a monumental day. He explained that Suho was not home when he returned, but he had started drinking alone because he could not simply ignore such a historic moment. Suho watched the writer for a moment and remarked that he must be exhausted from handling everything at once. He reassured the writer that there would be much more to celebrate in the future. The drunk reporter, still clutching the bottle, blinked and asked Suho if he was truly sure of that. Suho simply told him to calm down, saying that the future would reveal everything, looking at the food laid out on the table. Suho asked the surprised and slightly intoxicated reporter if he wanted to drink more even at this late hour. With a broad, satisfied smile, Jinhai immediately agreed. A wine glass was placed next to the food plate, and Suho said that he had tried the community app Jinhai recommended and it worked perfectly. He also added that he genuinely liked the apartment itself. While eating, Suho mentioned that he had read the reporter's blog and, seeing that it seemed to be doing just as well, he came to suspect that his companion must be incredibly wealthy. They continued drinking wine together, and Jinhai explained in a cheerful tone that he wasn't just a rich man. He was the youngest son of a keyball, which meant he couldn't simply be regarded as an ordinary wealthy person. Surprised, Suho asked if he was really from a keyball family, then held his glass. He took another sip. Jinhai continued speaking, saying that since Suho had shared a secret, she wanted to share one in return. She revealed that she was the youngest son of the chairman of the Decian group. Suho retorted that if he were the chairman's son, he would likely be the successor. However, the reporter shook his head and explained that he was nothing more than an illegitimate child because his father had many children with other women, and his mother was merely a concubine. He admitted that he had never told anyone this fact, but felt that Suho needed to know everything since he expected to work with him for a long time. Suho looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked if that meant being a reporter was just a hobby for him. He replied that it was partly true and that he sincerely enjoyed the work. He added that although his father gave him whatever he wanted, he had neither an inheritance nor any influence within the company. He said that although he was limited the opportunity to run a subsidiary, he honestly admitted and declined, stating that while he was a good journalist, he knew nothing about business. Raising his glass again, Suho remarked that he was, at the very least, an excellent journalist. Smiling brightly, the reporter replied that hearing those words gave him great strength and confessed that he had never met a hunter like Suho before. The two men slowly stood up and proposed a toast to the two of them. Suho agreed without hesitation, and their glasses clinked lightly. The next morning, Suho yawned at the apartment. I walked and poured boiling water into a cup in the kitchen, cheerfully saying good morning. Suho asked if he really planned to work on the weekend, and the reporter replied that he had a lot of work to do. Standing by the window and rubbing his sleepy eyes, Suho said he shouldn't have drunk too much last night, but Jaina smiled and said everything was fine. In fact, he had a very enjoyable time. Suho asked why he was already out looking for a new story, and the reporter. He replied that he could not make a living solely from articles about Suho forever. Upon hearing this, Suho inadvertently admitted that he respected him precisely for that reason, and Jai paused for a moment, surprised by the unexpected praise. After taking a sip, he asked what Suho planned to do today, and Suho reminded him that today was the very day he had mentioned earlier. Realizing this, Jai asked if he was going to the Nexus, and Suho nodded, explaining that the time had come as he had reached level 50 and received several upgrades last night. At those words, Gina froze and touched the water. She was surprised because Suho had been level 40 just yesterday. She looked at Suho in disbelief and demanded to know how he could have leveled up 10 levels in a single day. Suho casually shrugged his shoulders and corrected her, saying that to be precise, he was currently level 51. The reporter stared at him as if he were a stubborn trainee who couldn't be resolved, muttering that the more he got to know him, the more mysterious he became. Suho remarked that her tone sounded strangely suggestive. Then, while Gina rubbed her head, Suho asked why she was looking at him like that. Suddenly, the reporter pushed him toward the hallway and said that to enter such a serious organization, he needed to look fitting. Suho protested that he didn't need anything flashy and that casual clothes were fine, but the reporter insisted, saying he would gladly lend him proper clothes and a watch. When Suho continued to resist, the reporter declared that appearance mattered in a place like Nexus and reminded him that he could choose any of his cars. He added that if he showed up using public transportation or a taxi, everyone would stare. As the sleek red car came to a stop, a quiet, upscale residential area came into view and immediately caught the attention of the people waiting outside. The door opened upward and Suho stepped out wearing a sleek and elegant suit that fit him perfectly. for a moment. Meanwhile, he cleared his throat and thought that everything had worked out surprisingly well. A man in a suit approached, politely handed me a business card, and introduced himself as Baek Donghyuk, the representative of Nexus. Suho received it with a polite smile, introduced himself as In Suho, and followed him into the guild building. Shortly after, he sat down with the 3 representatives of Nexus. Donghyuk calmly remarked that Suho must have leveled up significantly over the past few days, and since he had previously mentioned wanting to become a civil servant, he wondered if that sudden growth had caused him to eliminate his goal. Suho explained that nothing had changed. His goal remained the same. The leaders exchanged surprised glances, and Suho asked exactly what that meant. Donghyuk leaned forward and asked Suho why he wanted to join a private guild if his true intention was to become a civil servant. Suho honestly replied that joining Nexus would make it easier to achieve his goal. He announced that he planned to take the level 5 exam this year. Someone asked if he was only after the evaluation bonus points, and Suho replied that technically that was true, but it was merely part of a larger strategy. If he pursued only the Hunter Association, the association would consider him to have no alternative. That was precisely why he intended to join Nexus. Because if the association saw better terms offered elsewhere, they would improve their own conditions as well. He added that while working at Nexus, he would dedicate himself entirely to the guild to make the partnership mutually beneficial. Donghyuk listened quietly while Suho promised to give 100%, but the guild leader eventually leaned back and said he understood. However, he wanted to ask one question. He pointed out that when Suho first approached, Nexus was struggling and Suho's abilities were completely unknown. Hiring him at that time was risky, but still reasonable. However, now any guild in Korea will fight to claim him. But among all those guilds, did Suho only access the Nexus? While smiling quietly, the guild master continued speaking, saying that while Suho clearly had talent, his true intentions were unclear. With his hands clasped, Donghyuk warned that cooperation would be impossible unless Suho answered honestly. Suho closed his eyes for a moment and replied that he had a personal reason. He reminded Donghyuk of the public speech he had previously given, in which Nexus promised to do everything in its power to destroy all the gates in Korea. Suho acknowledged that Nexus had provided more support to the victims' families than any other guild, and was the most passionate about eliminating the gates. He said he had no doubt that the speech was sincere. Because of that conviction, he wanted to work with Nexus, help them, and contribute everything he had. Smiling broadly, he added that he hoped to continue cooperating even after he eventually joined the Hunter Association. Donghyuk lowered his gaze and admitted that the reason was satisfactory. Then he asked if Suho really believed it was necessary to join the association, given that Nexus was already clearing out the gates and working tirelessly to support the hunters. Suho agreed, but if Nexus really wants to completely end the gate, like other sealed high-risk gates under strict government control, he explained that he had to go to a place where even hunters could not go. His gaze shifted to the image of a portal bound by chains. Beyond the ordinary intermediate entrance, there were also the 5 great gates. That was precisely why he needed the government's authority. However, until that time comes, every successful attack will make the name of Nexus known along with his name. The impact will reshape the power structure of Korean guilds, and Nexus will rise to first place. Donghyuk placed his hands on the table and said that all of this would only last as long as Suho was with them. Suho nodded and said that was the very reason he promised to devote everything while he was here. Blinking in shock, Suho suddenly asked if they had already found a team candidate since their previous conversation. Suho confirmed it and revealed the first candidate, Kang Dian. She froze and asked again as if she couldn't believe she had heard correctly. Suho nodded and casually said that he was the one who transferred Dian to the tank role. She sprang to her feet in anger and demanded to know what Suho would do if the tanking didn't suit him. Suho calmly raised his hand to soothe her. He said it was a decision made after properly analyzing everything. He reminded her that Dian had passed the exam with excellent grades. She gritted her teeth and said that Dian ranked second in the expected circuit. She recalled that she had failed to receive the results she had achieved. She admitted that she had planned to thank the person in charge, but Suho just shrugged his shoulders and said it was no big deal, which annoyed her even more. The third Nexus representative finally spoke up, saying that while Suho's proposal sounds great, it requires a clear explanation. He said that if Suho intends to attack the sealed gates, he must be aware that those locations are protected by the government and that private guilds cannot access them at all because civilian safety is the top priority. He asked how Suho planned to enter. Suho calmly asked if he doubted his abilities. He then stated that he would finalize the contract if they brought a pass proving his trustworthiness. He paused to reconsider and changed his proposal. Instead of bringing the pass, he suggested they first conquer a sealed gate and then sign the contract. The secretary broke out in a cold sweat at the scale of the conditions and muttered that Suho was proposing conditions befitting royalty. Suho argued that the conditions were fair. The secretary pointed out that despite his immense potential, he still appeared to be nothing more than a rookie hunter without an official position. However, Suho declared that it was precisely for this reason that he would immediately conquer the sealed gate and prove himself. Dongyuk observed him closely and agreed, stating that Suho would undoubtedly prove his worth. With a satisfied smile, the guild master said he was pleased with today's results and would finalize the details once the gate was captured. Shortly after, Suho leaves the building and drives away. Dongyuk and his secretary stood at the entrance and watched the red car disappear. The guild leader quietly gave instructions to prepare. He ordered the formation of a special support team and the preparation of all necessary documents for Suho. The secretary hesitated and asked if they should wait until Suho kept his promise. Dongyuk replied with a confident smile that Suho would certainly accomplish it and that providing support early would only further strengthen their alliance. Closing his eyes, he said he believed Suho would keep his promise. Slightly overwhelmed, the secretary asked what had made the guild master so certain. Dongyuk replied that it was not a guess and that the secretary already knew. The man finally nodded. Nodding, I recalled the conviction in Suho's resolute gaze and voice. The scene was: the building had been transformed into the massive Alternative Hunter Association, and in one of the offices, Yang Qiaomin sat slumped in front of a computer, clutching his head in frustration. With Suho showing absolutely no intention of joining voluntarily, he was desperately trying to figure out how to bring him into the organization. Qiaomin considered offering a reward for conquering the Tower of Realization, but knowing full well that it would never be approved at that level, he immediately abandoned the idea. They didn't want a photo of Suho being thanked. They wanted a photo of Suho standing next to the association president, smiling, to make it look as if they were already close friends. Qiaomin disliked using force or pressure, but Chief Pai's previous proposal kept swirling in his mind. It was a proposal tantamount to forcibly dragging Suho over if necessary. Qiaomin groaned and buried his head in the desk, wondering if he had really decided to work in such a stressful place. His cell phone vibrated while he was cursing his life choices. The caller ID showed an unknown number. He answered the phone listlessly and introduced himself. I am Yang Qiaomin. He tried to figure out who was calling from the unknown number. However, the moment he heard the voice of Suhakai, his expression changed completely. It was on Suho. Qiaomin jumped up from his chair, his eyes wide, and could barely believe that he had heard it correctly. The scene shifted to a small soup restaurant where steam was rising from a boiling pot. Suho and Qiaomin sat facing each other at a table. Suho mentioned that it had been a long time since he had visited and said that this restaurant served the best boiled pork. Qiaomin blinked in surprise and asked how Suho knew of this place. With a calm smile, Suho nonchalantly lied, saying that he used to come here often when he worked nearby. Qiaomin slowly nodded, accepting the explanation. As he scooped up some broth with a spoon, he admitted that he had never expected Suho to contact him first. He then asked why Suho had changed his number. Suho explained that he received too many calls, so he simply created a second number, and now Qiaomin could use it. The civil servant nodded in understanding and remarked that Suho must have been exhausted by the unwanted attention. Lowering his gaze, Qiaomin sincerely thanked him for contacting him and admitted that he had almost given up hope of ever seeing him again. Suho picked up his chopsticks, asking how he could even think that. He then calmly asked if they were pressuring him at this point and if they wanted to persuade Qiaomin to join the association. Caught off guard, Qiaomin froze and placed his hand on his face as if trying to hide his reaction. He nervously asked why Suho was making such a guess. Holding chopsticks near his cheek, Suho explained that it was strange that the association president suddenly requested a meeting after the top pledge. This is because usually no matter how difficult the gate is, the association only handles the paperwork. They never tried to actively recruit anyone. Speechless, Qiaomin looked down with an anxious smile. Suho said that after thinking it over, he realized the executives only wanted to take promotional photos. Hearing this, Qiaomin looked at him with fearful eyes eyes, but Suho reassured them that everything was fine. He simply said it would have been better if they had been honest, since there was nothing wrong with saying so. Cheolmin apologized, but Suho shook his head, saying there was no need. He had already understood the situation on his own. In fact, he was even grateful to Cheolmin. The official pointed at him in confusion, and Suho could not believe he had heard correctly. Suho continued to explain that while such situations often involve threats or coercion, Cheolmin handled everything professionally. Rubbing the back of his neck in embarrassment, Cheolmin admitted that he still felt something was wrong. Suho casually mentioned that he had decided to visit the association at that time. Cheolmin stopped what he was doing and asked if he was serious. Suho continued his meal comfortably, confirming this, and explained that he wanted to thank Cheolmin and felt that meeting the association executives could actually be beneficial. Cheolmin slowly nodded in agreement, saying that it really could be. Suho asked when he should visit the association. Cheolmin suggested discussing it after finishing the meal. However, in the middle of speaking, he had an epiphany and sprang from his seat, his eyes shining with excitement. With a sudden decision, he declared that he would immediately arrange a meeting. Shortly after, the two people arrived at a building next to Dienwanter. Suho posed for a photo next to the organization's chairman. Jang Kyung-hwa smiled at the camera and said she was glad to finally meet Suho. She thanked him for accepting the invitation despite his busy schedule. Vice Chairman Park Hyun-moo added that it was not a common occurrence to meet such a promising newcomer. Suho smiled politely and replied that it was a great honor to meet the leaders of the association. However, behind that expression, he found it unbearable even to look at these people. Although he had managed to look them one last time, a sense of disgust immediately returned. Kyung-hwa asked if Suho really intended to join the Korean Hunter Association. Narrowing his eyes slightly, Suho replied that it was his dream and exactly as he had stated in his pre-exam interview. The chairman asked for the reason. With his gaze lowered, Suho explained that he had solidified due to the gate's occurrence and wanted to eliminate Porter as quickly as possible to protect humanity. However, inwardly, Suho told himself that this was only one reason. The other was to prevent the chairman and his subordinates from destroying the association from within. Kyung-hwa cheerfully praised Suho's noble intentions, and Suho thought to himself that this man would cling to his position until the very last moment before being kicked out. He was really looking forward to seeing what expression this old pig would wear when that day finally arrived, and Kyung-hwa wasn't the only one having trouble with the association. Just then, Park Hyun-moon spoke up again and said that Suho really knew how to leave a good impression. With his arms crossed, he said that Suho was admirable because he had no interest in material gain and only wanted to protect the general public. The vice president gathered his fingertips and solemnly added that Suho had grown into a strong and noble person whom his parents would be proud of. Suho thought to himself that the person who proposed this recruitment show must surely be Hyun-moon, and he politely expressed his gratitude. In his heart, Suho thought of him as a pathetic flatterer existing solely to close off Jeongwon's path. Most of the gates in the previous life had not been conquered because of fools, and he intended to take away their chance to ruin them again. Then Hyun-moon happily asked Suho which department he wanted to join. Suho replied that he had considered several options while rubbing his chin in thought, but ultimately chose the gate department. While Cheolmin was frozen in shock, the vice president asked for the reason. Suho calmly explained that, unlike civilian guilds, the association can directly access the gate, handle initial investigations, and participate in the raid. Kyung-hwa remarked that he was surprised to see such an altruistic person, and noted that Suho had chosen the most dangerous department in the entire association. Park Hyun-moon nodded, declaring that someone like An Suho was exactly the kind of person suited for that place. At this, the chairman turned to Cheolmin and instructed him to show their sincerity. Confused, Suho asked what that meant. Kyung-hwa replied that since Suho was so eager to end the Porter program, and there were many gates within the association that could be targeted, they should give him the opportunity to choose which gate to attack himself. Cheolmin nearly fainted as he reminded the chairman that the gates were either sealed or extremely fatal. However, before he could finish his sentence, He said gladly that it sounded perfect. Cheolmin tried to persuade him once again that it was incredibly dangerous, but Suho clenched his fist and excitedly declared that he would attack the gates that posed the greatest threat to humanity. Jong-hwan responded confidently that this was exactly what he had expected from An Suho. Cheolmin, still in shock, called the chairman but the man. He asked if there was a problem. Under pressure, Cheolmin bowed his head and said that everything was fine and he would prepare whatever was needed. Jong-hwan told Suho to prepare to attack the porter, While Suho politely thanked him, Cheolmin glared down. He knew that to these unawakened executives, the most deadly gate was nothing but a toy, so he annihilated the leaders who had never set foot in the gate, completely unaware of how sacrificial the danger was. Countless hunters had died trying to attack those portals, and these two were driving Suho to a near-certain death. While Cheolmin gritted his teeth in frustration, Suho was sealed. He smiled calmly, knowing exactly what was waiting inside the gate. Hyeon Moon leaned toward the chairman and whispered something. Suho immediately understood that these two cared only about profit and did not care how many hunters died. As long as the pledge succeeded and the association gained influence, human lives were not important. Kyung Hwa looked at Suho again and asked what rank he planned to take on the exam. Suho smiled and replied that he intended to take the rank 5 exam by the end of the year. Kyung Hwa asked if he knew how difficult that exam was. Suho replied that reaching that rank would open up more opportunities, and that he planned to join a guild to gain experience in the meantime. Kyung Hwa raised her hand and said it was a very good idea. We prefer experienced applicants. Then she asked how long private guild contracts usually last. Suho said that time was not a priority. Gaining actual field experience was important. If the guild met his requirements, he would stay until he passed the exam and entered the association. Kyung Hwa yawned and said she hoped Suho would be able to find such a place. Smiling to himself, Suho thought, if the chairman approves these conditions, joining Nexus might be possible. He sensed an opportunity to bridge the gap between Nexus and the association. Suddenly, the door opened and someone announced their arrival on Paesong Road. Suho's expression hardened. Paesong Gil walked in confidently and stopped while joking that the pretty girls were eating something delicious without him. When he spotted Suho sitting there, his lips parted wide as he smiled. He turned to leave politely, but Jeong Hwan told him to stay and introduced Suho as the hunter who had conquered the Tower of Trials. Paesong struggled to recall the name, then suddenly shouted that he remembered it. Smiling, he said he was truly surprised to meet him, extended his hand, and introduced himself as the head of the special unit. Suho shook his hand and introduced himself as On Suho. They exchanged polite compliments, but Suho's smile remained sharp. As they sat down, Hyunmun raised his hand and informed Paesong that Suho intended to take the grade 5 exam. Paesong blinked in shock and said that it would be very difficult. Suho said that he still wanted to give it a try. Paesong stared at him blankly. He added that the association planned to grant Suho access to the sealed gate because one of the executives had claimed that he could conquer it. Paesong eyes widened and he froze. Covering his mouth as if in disbelief, Nagi muttered. Looking at Suho with concern, he asked if he was really sure, as those gates were very dangerous. Suho noticed the youthful anxiety on his face and found it strangely amusing. He replied that he was well aware of the danger. Still anxious, Paesong crossed his arms, thinking that even if he wanted to, he wouldn't be able to stop Suho, but sincerely. He said he hoped things would go well. Suho inwardly acknowledged that Paesong was a hunter and someone who cherished talent. His expression showed not concern for himself, but genuine worry about the possibility that someone promising might die in vain. Then, Paesong added that if Suho wanted to join the special forces, he would personally look after him. Hyunmu immediately raised his finger to warn him not to scout him. Suho had already chosen the gate department. Paesong asked if that was the only choice. Hyunmu replied that Suho wants to destroy all the gates and wants priority access to them. Paesong slowly nodded as if he now understood. He said that if that was the only thing that mattered, his department could also support him. Turning his head, he smiled at Cheolmin and asked him to confirm it. Unfortunately, Cheolmin nodded. With his hands on his hips, Paesong said that if Suho passed the level 5 exam, his relationship with Cheolmin might become quite complicated. Facing the young hunter, he added that they could discuss all of that after the exam was over. But for now, he sincerely wished for Suho's success. Suho politely expressed his gratitude, thinking to himself, what a cunning fox. He quietly glanced at Cheolmin. He had already realized that if he passed the exam, he would be higher in rank than him, and that alone would put Cheolmin in a very difficult position. Suho let out a sigh. That was precisely why dealing with Cheolmin felt complicated. He did not want the man to be cornered or intimidated. After the meeting ended, the two walked side by side down the long hallway. Cheolmin fixed his gaze on the floor, his shoulders slumped with worry. Suho glanced at him once more and finally asked if he was troubled by what the skin chief had said earlier. Cheolmin admitted that he certainly was. He knew better than anyone how talented Suho was. However, even with those abilities, conquering a sealed gate was a task beyond the ordinary. He told Suho to be extremely careful in a serious tone and said that he could speak personally to the chairman to have the association provide as much support as possible. Suho looked at him with sincere gratitude and said that his concern was truly precious. However, Cheolmin was not speaking out of politeness. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. He reminded Suho that he had only recently become a hunter and warned him again that the sealed gates were completely different from ordinary ones. He then asked Suho if he understood why the government trusted no one other than the Hunter Association and ordered them to attack those gates. Suho calmly replied that due to national security protocols, even the Choisang Guild was rarely allowed to enter the sealed gates. Cheolmin stopped walking, looked at him with a confused expression, and asked why he still insisted on going there. Suho answered simply, he was absolutely certain that he would succeed. He said that everything would be fine. Then, with a faint smile, Suho mentioned that among the sealed gates managed by the association, there was one called the Nameless Sword. Cheolmin immediately froze and said that the gate was one of the most dangerous things in existence. Suho's expression did not change. He simply smiled a little more and said that he already knew how to defeat it.